Hey, it's episode 11 of the Gaming Memories podcast, where I, the blessed beatmaker Roboclip, your friendly neighborhood prophet, seer, and revelator, you know, the guy that can talk to the gaming gods, you can't talk to them, you gotta go through me, yeah, that guy. Well, they told me, the Holy Triforce, Miyamoto the Father, Kojima the Son, and Carmack the Holy Ghost, they commanded me to create the one true gaming podcast, the best gaming podcast on planet Earth, and they told me exactly how to do it. All I do is just interview creative and interesting people about their favorite gaming memories growing up. And on this episode of the podcast, we have a kind of out of left field, something I would have never expected doing when I started the podcast, but that is interview a commercial airline pilot who is an airline pilot simply because of video games, and we'll get into that. His name is Mike Rushforth. I've actually known him for a very long time, and I knew he was a commercial airline pilot, but I didn't know that he became a pilot because of video games. So he wanted to hop onto the podcast, talk about the video games that impacted him growing up. Newsflash, spoiler alert, there might be some flight simulator in there. Go figure, right? And how badass flight simulator is. We talk about Arma, the army simulator, and how deep down the rabbit hole mother effers can get going into that game. The rabbit hole goes deep. And just all around, we have a great time. Mike is a legitimate badass on top of being a commercial airline pilot, which is no easy feat in of itself. He's actually a really good guitar player. He makes music under Mike Rushforth. I would say it's sort of like chill, ambient, maybe like album leaf, explosions in the sky, sometimes no drums, more ambient, more reverb, really chill stuff. If you like to hang back, relax, put the headphones on, get into that transcendental state, Mike Rushforth's music can definitely do that for you. They are gaming god approved. Miyamoto the Father himself said it's pretty dope beats, so check them out. And then he also played guitar for a band After Tomorrow. If you're into emo, pop punk, when that was in, Mike was in, shredded on the guitar. Had a fantastic time talking to him. Make sure to check his stuff out. I will put links in the podcast description as usual. And always remember, kids, ladies and gentlemen, fellow members of the congregation, the chosen people, it's your duty to spread the good news of the Gaming Memories Gospel. Make sure to like, share, comment, hit it up. Let your friends and family know the gaming gods will bless you. I give you my prophetic promise. The windows of heaven shall open up and pour blessings so much there shall not be room enough to receive them. So do your duty. I say these things in the name of Miyamoto the Father, Kojima the Son, and Carmack the Holy Ghost. Enjoy the show, and amen, friends.
We've kept in contact over the years, though, man. It's I've always been following you and appreciate all the stuff you've been doing.
Yeah, and you've been making a lot of music, a lot of ambient music. It seems like you've stuck with it for a solid, it's been a couple years, right?
Well, yeah, that's the thing is, like, I feel like I have so much more time that I could put into it, but I don't, you know, and then I went back to look at the last song I did. It was like in like January. And I'm like, man, 8 months can just fly by, and you don't realize that you haven't worked on what you love doing, you know. But yeah, I don't know. That's what happens, I guess.
Well, so I was trying to think. I can't remember how we met. Do you remember?
So
how
we met through either Kylie or Tyler Cardin.
I do remember Tyler because he was a snowboard instructor at Sundance, right? I think that's where I knew him from.
And for whatever reason, you just came over to my house and we just started hanging out.
Yes.
And then me and you connected on Refused.
Yes, that's what it was.
And I remember I was like, what? Like, no way. Like, I don't know anyone else who likes hardcore and blah, blah. And then we just kind of connected on music. And I don't know how what else happened, but we just kept in touch. It was weird.
I remember, I brought up Refused because another friend of mine had showed him to me semi-recently. Like, it was fairly, like, within the year before I met you, and I was still pretty into him. And you had, and obviously I got into them late, like a lot of people did. They were already dead and done. And you had the DVD that I didn't even know existed.
Oh, that's right.
And you showed me the DVD, and I was like, okay, this dude's dope.
Yeah, the Refused are fucking dead. Yeah, that was like an awesome DVD. Like,
it's a great DVD. You know
Yeah,
what's
so
so
good.
awesome about that? Specifically the album "A Shape of Punk to Come." It was the shape of punk to come.
Exactly.
And
Yeah,
if,
isn't that weird? Like that's so prophetic for them to do that. Like I listen to them now and like I listen to what they say and I'm like, damn, dude, they're kind of arrogant, but at the same time, like they actually did it. Like
yeah,
they really did do that. So yeah, it's kind of funny.
yeah.
But
If
yeah,
you
I still listen to it, man. I still listen to them on a regular basis. So
what would you classify them as for people who don't know who they are?
they're I guess you just call they're like hardcore punk, but they kind of started their way into like the beginnings of metalcore, maybe like kind of like opening up that door to
Yeah,
metalcore. But they kept a
metalcore
lot.
and a little bit of electronic influences made
Uh
their
huh.
way in there. Yeah,
Yeah, I had a hard time with that at the beginning. Like when I was in high school and I first heard them, I was like, yeah, I don't know about the electronic stuff. And then now I'm like, oh,
yeah,
that
it's
was
dope.
genius.
Yeah.
Obviously, like it took me a while to kind of catch on to that though. But yeah, yeah,
So yeah, we met over Refuse, kept hanging out, and then the reason why I'll have a little intro that I recorded, but the reason why
yeah, cool.
you guys should listen to what you have to say about video games is you are a pilot. What airline are you flying for?
So typically, I don't say publicly in the kind of
Okay,
situations. I'm not trying to be coy, but just because I don't represent them necessarily. But I
but you're a
typically say that.
legit pilot.
Yeah, so I'm an airline captain for a major airline in the United States, based in Las Vegas, and so fly the Airbus A320. Typically, people can kind of figure out, if they kind of do a little research, who I fly for. But I just don't say the company name publicly.
So you can
Um,
freely express all your opinions with no recourse.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. So I still, yeah, exactly. So not trying to be coy, like I said, but try to be a little careful about that. So yeah.
And you got a hold of me and you said, "Hey, man, I really, really want to be on the pod." Normally, it's me begging people to be on the podcast, so it's nice that you got a hold of me and said, "Hey, I actually am a pilot because of video games. I want to be on your podcast."
Yeah, yeah. I think I saw you posted it up on Facebook. I'm like, oh, gaming. Like you hadn't even. This is your first podcast, and I saw the kind of the concept of what you were trying to do here, and I'm like, that is a fantastic idea. And I just actually said, hey, I'm on this. Let's talk about it. I just wanted to go and listen to it, and then you're like, hey, you want to come on? And I said, yeah, absolutely. And then I kind of pitched you some of the stuff I was thinking about. So, but yeah, we can get into that too. So
Yeah, well, we'll get into that. I want people to know what we're
yeah,
going to
yeah.
end up talking about. I also wanted to bring up you were in. I also thought you were really cool because when I first met you, you had already done the music thing and toured around, and you had some really cool tour photos and some cool demos. And I can remember this one photo in particular that you had with some emo hair and a guitar and some footage, and I was like, "Oh, you guys rocked! You guys
Oh
went
yeah, yeah.
hard."
Yeah, that's right. I remember showing you that stuff, and it actually like someone actually in Provo actually cared.
What was
Someone
the
cared
band
about it.
called?
It's called After Tomorrow.
After
So
Tomorrow. Is there anything
yeah,
online still?
yeah, we put a lot of our pop punk stuff up online. It's on Spotify and all that. I put it up a couple years ago, or maybe even just last year. Stuck all that stuff up there, and then we have some stuff when we kind of transition more to I would say kind of the screamo style in the early 2000s when that was big. When we transitioned to that, we recorded a full EP, and we got all the way up to right prior to mastering it, and then I ended up leaving the band. So ended up going to Guatemala for a couple of years.
You
So
ruined it.
I know, man. Yeah.
Oh, you just shattered those poor boys' dreams.
Which is sad because we should have finished it, and there were
You
when
might
I
as
got
well have
back
finished
after
it. Yeah.
when I got back after 2 years, those guys didn't end up, none of those guys went on any sort of, religious missions or anything like that. But, when we came back, we're like, why don't we just put that thing out and let it simmer for a couple of years? Because Seosin, if you remember them back in the day, they put out an EP, 5 songs, and
Yep.
they just put that out and they played some shows here and there, but that was about it. And they let it sit and just simmer for a couple of years, and then they went and hit it hard. And actually got pretty big. So we're like, man, we could have done it, but oh well, woulda, coulda, shoulda, I
Seosin was so awesome. I remember the first time I heard
yeah,
them. I don't regret any of the emo and the stuff that end up coming from that. And I still think some of those early bands. I know we're talking about music, but I had the same idea. Like, oh, we could talk about music you grow up that influenced you growing up, or movies. And so Anyway, we're gonna go off. The first time I heard Seosin, I remember a friend came over. He was way younger, and he had the emo look, and I already wrote him off. It's like, hey, this kid plays guitar, whatever. And he started playing guitar, and he was pretty good. And he said, check out this band. This is the kind of stuff that I want to make. And he left. And I went running, and I put it in the headphones. And I don't know what album. You probably know their discography better than me, but it was...
Actually don't. I just know that one EP they put out. So
does it have like the song C sharp or Symphony of C or something like that?
I can't remember the songs. I'd have to go back and take a look
there's
at it.
Seosin fans out here.
It's been a long time.
You assholes!
Jerks, yeah.
Posers! Seosin EP. I don't even know how to spell it. They're going to be freaking out.
They were just the example for us because that was kind of the way that they went about dropping their music, and we're like, man, we could have done that, and look at what they did,
Lost Symphonies. That was the song.
Okay, cool.
That song, I was like, I've never heard anything this. This is like really cool. This is an interesting take. And then some of the bands that spawned from that I ended up really liking was a band from Arizona, Scary Kids Scaring Kids.
Yeah, I remember that.
That's my emo band. Like when I want to just listen to emo, metalcore, and just want to relive that, and it's them and The Used. Those are my two go-tos.
Yeah, cool. Awesome. Yeah, I go back to a lot of that stuff, man. All my running playlists, man, are all old hardcore bands that I still listen to, and all sorts of those old punk bands, man. I dig it. So. Did
you ever listen to Poison the Well?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Nerdy. Yeah, that was great, man. I saw them live at Warped Tour in probably 2001. Yeah, live at Warped Tour. Yeah, long time
That's
ago.
what sold me. I saw them live at, I don't know if it was the same Warped Tour, but a Warped Tour for sure. Those were awesome. And they just rocked so hard that I went and bought like 2 of their CDs as soon as I got home. They were awesome.
Yep, Poison the Well. One big one, probably one of my biggest bands I still listen to is Converge. I actually don't have it up right now, but the Jane Doe poster, I have a Jane Doe flag that I usually have up in my office, but I don't have it up right now. But yeah, so I have a Jane Doe mug, coffee mug, all that stuff. So yeah, really cool. But
what do you listen to now? What have you moved on to?
All that stuff. I mean, I listen to all sorts of stuff. I mean, and the type of music I've been doing. One of probably my biggest influences from the music that I've been doing lately, which I haven't worked that hard at producing. But
where can people find that, by the way? Bandcamp?
Spotify. Yeah, Bandcamp.
You're just your name, Mike Rushforth?
Mike Rushforth, yeah.
Nice.
Anything
we'll put some links in the description.
Yeah, cool. A lot of that stuff. I've been really influenced by Illuvium as of late with that kind of stuff. Yeah, so it's this guy. He just does really like cinematic type stuff, and he's mainly a pianist. But he does a lot of just like music for movies and soundtracks and things like that on the side. But he has all of his stuff on. I think it's through Temporary Residence, the record label Temporary Residence. Once you hear him, I think you'll recognize who he is. But
okay, super
good stuff. Just really ethereal, kind of ambient type music. And I just dig it because it's the one guy doing it, and he's kind of, I think he relies on his computer a lot to do a lot of that stuff, and that's what I'm doing. I'm just, I don't have time to kind of get with the band. I don't have time to, to work out all those schedules. I know what that life is like, and when you're a dad, when you have a career, and all that stuff, it's it's hard to fit that stuff in. So the thought of like my influences were like, okay, hey, there's like these bedroom producers, these kids who have like their laptop and they just sit on their bed and they make these cool beats and music and stuff like that. And while I might not make the electronic music that sounds like them, I like their workflow and the way that they do things, because that's kind of the
you can, with the technology now, you can make whatever's in your head.
Yeah.
And the barrier to entry is so much lower. The programs are getting better and faster and more intuitive. And the gear is getting cheaper and higher quality, and it floods the marketplace with a lot more music. But what I found that like you can find lots of really cool variations of stuff that you love, and you can go real deep, much deeper than you could have pre-internet age, right? When you just had I remember skate videos is how I found new music. I didn't even skate. But skate videos had cool new music, so
that's how I discovered Modest Mouse. Yeah, Modest Mouse through an old 411 skate video. Geez, man, old a ton of bands through, those old Toy Machine videos and stuff. But Yeah,
Yeah.
the media was so different when we were kids, and like this is kind of what you were alluding to earlier was that, we grew up with this certain type of media. Um, and it's interesting to see like now that we're older, and now we have jobs, and now we kind of have the money to be able to invest in these things. It's cool because now the technology is doing what we wished it would have done then, if that makes sense.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
at the same time, like I wouldn't trade that for anything. I would have
No.
traded that experience of having that limitation set in front of me. So
Well, that limitation is why the idea for the podcast to me was so sexy. Is a lot of times I found when I was hanging out with friends, we talked about mutual interests growing up. Like that was like sometimes I find that a lot of men like to just talk about mutual interest or things or music, whatever, and you bond over that. And it's like, oh, well, if I'm doing this all the time, and it's I find it very entertaining just to listen to these conversations, even when I'm
yeah,
not participating. And I also find them super fun. Like, there's something magical about growing up and only having so many games at a Blockbuster to choose from, and only
yeah,
having
yeah,
so many CDs. Like before you could burn CDs, and there was no Napster. I mean, you had to like, and you were a kid. Your disposable income was really low, so whatever CD you got, that's this, and you gave it. You got your money's worth. You memorized that CD. If it's
yeah,
something you
yeah.
liked, you knew every song, you knew every lyric,
Hmm.
you knew every break, you knew it as an entire album. And that I love music, but I never listen to music like that anymore. Now I just
No,
in
yeah,
some ways it's better because I have all these playlists for certain moods. I really like deep, chill, ambient kind of melodic music, and I have this Spotify playlist. It's like thousands of songs deep, and now
yeah.
The Spotify algorithm is so good. It looks at those songs and it's requesting me new songs, and 50% of the time they're dope as shit. And there's just so much music. I just put it on the playlist. I don't even know the song names. I don't know the artist names. I just
Yeah.
shuffle it, and I'm like, oh yeah, that song. I like this one. It sucks for the artist because I have no idea where they are.
No, right? Yeah, it's hard because like I feel like I click around too much on these songs these days with Spotify, whereas like I was really into albums, in junior high, high school, college. Like I would have a CD, I'd stick it in the CD player in the car, and that's what I would listen to, and I'd listen to the whole album. So, and I feel like that's kind of the, like you're saying, kind of the magic part of what makes a good band is how they put together an album, not necessarily the cool song that they put together, there's lots of bands like that, like one hit wonder type thing. But now it's like I'll listen to a band even if they're one hit wonder on Spotify, and I won't even know it.
Yeah,
So
because they'll just kind of keep
it's
playing.
tough,
And,
man. It's
yeah.
tough. And so yeah, me and my wife, we were just talking about this the other day about burning CDs and having the big computer in the living room, and we're sitting there trying to download all these songs off of Napster, and we're trying to explain this to our kids, to my 9-year-old, and she's like, she just can't
It
even.
doesn't even fathom.
No,
Yeah.
she can't understand it, man. It's so funny. Like, I mean, we could understand when our parents would be like, yeah, we used to listen to records, and like we could totally understand that
You can
because it's this.
conceptualize that. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. And now it's this thing that's out in the, it's in the cloud.
As
All
far
this, all
yeah,
these songs are just everywhere. So yeah,
as far as a kid is concerned, music is basically just air. It's just in the air, and you can
yeah.
just get it whenever you want it. Just push a button, you get whatever music you want. It's
I
like
know,
air.
but and that's what kind of trips me out is like, what's the next thing after that? What is music going to be after that? What's it going to sound like?
Elon Musk's Neuralink. It just bypasses your freaking eardrums, goes straight into your
Oh man,
brainstem. It does It does music, feeling,
yeah, exactly.
smell, touch, all in once. You just lay back. See ya.
Yeah, yeah. So
That's
cool,
probably
man.
what's going to happen, if it's possible. I have some friends
Yeah.
that have been debating about whether the concept of Neuralink is even feasible. And obviously, I'm a dummy. I have no idea. I'm not a scientist. I'm not Neuralink. I think some
I
of
made
it's
it.
feasible, but people make good arguments that it's not feasible. And I don't know
Well,
how to tell the difference.
when you hear the interviews with Elon Musk, he's just like so matter of fact about it. He's like, yeah, yeah, it's gonna happen. Like, yeah, it's gonna happen. Yeah, it's like, oh,
Okay.
wait, okay, like when, and how, he doesn't even,
My counter
they've already thought of all those things.
my
They're
counter
just trying to
argument
figure out how to.
though is historically, this is what other. That's not my counter argument. I'm just parroting what someone else said that
Sure.
sounded awesome. If I wanted to argue against it, is when you look at Tesla, Edison, and the other famous inventors, even ones who aren't famous, but they're credited to some sort of thing that you wouldn't even know about. When you think about it, like I'm sure some guy invented the lamp, or I don't know, something like that, and he's probably, but we don't know who he is. Apparently, most guys are like 1 to 5 hit wonders with thousands of failed ideas.
Yeah.
So you could argue like Elon's had a couple good ideas. He's probably had a lot of failed ideas we don't even know about. How do you know that Neuralink is just going to be a failed idea?
Good point. Yep. I don't know, man. I'm hoping it's kind of maybe the tunnel thing, like, maybe the tunnel thing's a failed thing, but I don't know. The Neuralink actually kind of scares me, to be honest.
I buy into it to a certain extent. So a lot of people will argue like the nature of consciousness and can you upload and download, and was that even really you? I'm not even going to get into that. That's so like whatever. But I do think it's possible because there are people who are paraplegic or have prosthetic arms that they can control that arm remotely with their mind over the internet. There's a video of a guy. I'll find it and put it in the link to the podcast. He's like sitting in a room, just sitting there, la-da-da-da-da. He's got like some harness hooked on his head. And then there's video of like an arm sitting on a table, just a robot arm. And they're in separate rooms, and he can control it with his mind.
Wow. Dude, that's insane. It's
not really good. He's not like picking up marbles and sifting things with a lot of dexterity. But there is something going on there, and there's a handful of people I found on YouTube that have legitimate motorized prosthetic limbs.
Yeah.
And then they just think, and they can get them to move. So I think if you extrapolate that, somehow taking ones and zeros, or firing of your neurons and translating that to a computer, which also runs on ones and zeros, that concept seems like it might line up, and you could do things like possibly navigate your computer hands-free. Right?
Dude, I don't even have anything to say to that because I don't know. I don't have the words to like explain like how that works. It's like, how do you program that? Like, how do you convert, the electronic impulses that are going through your brain into, these other pieces of electronic, into these movements.
There's a video of a lady
way beyond
who's quadriplegic, and you know how when you're like on a console and you have to type.
Yeah.
You have to like move the mouse and like click on the letter. It kind of sucks. It's really slow, but if you're playing PS4 or whatever, that's just the way you got to do it. There's a lady that's doing a similar thing. She's in a chair. She's totally quadriplegic, like no movement except for I think a little bit in her neck. And she's looking at a screen, and she's hooked up to a harness, like a brain harness. And she's able to move the mouse and click on letters with just thinking, with her mind. Very rudimentary. But if that gets dialed down to something that is more intuitive and maybe a little bit like I don't know how they do it, but they can do that at least. There's someone out there doing that. So if they can do that, how do you know you can't shrink that down to your phone, have a pair of contacts that are giving you a heads-up display of your phone, and you just have to think, and you can move and click on your app. You're not controlling your phone in any deeper way than you are. You're just replacing the mouse or the thumb or the finger with a mouse that's controlled with your thoughts.
Yeah.
That alone by itself could change everything.
Yeah, and I think it's gonna take society a while to get to that point where we can even fathom, that's even something that we're gonna be able to use day to day, just like the home computer was for a while. Like we were kids, right? And you get to use the old, I don't even know what the name of, like those old Macintoshes when you're in school, and that was a new thing, like that whole desktop thing, and you're playing Oregon Trail and elementary school,
Speaking of video game memories, you're the only person that's brought up Oregon Trail, so thank you, because that one's classic.
Yeah, right. Oh man, that was fantastic. I mean, just the scenarios you'd get into, and you're like, oh yeah, your sister got diphtheria and died, and you're like, oh man. I don't know.
I always hated crossing the rivers, and I would always choose to caulk the whatever. You had options of like to wade through or go around and add miles, or you could caulk it and try to float, which was the most risky. But if it worked, it was like the most efficient. And I would just caulk it every time. And then if it failed, I'd just start all over until I could get a run where the caulk worked every single time. And then I have this awesome score.
I need to pull up an emulator of that thing because I can't remember all the details of how the game actually works. I just remember playing it a ton in elementary school. Every week you'd have, once a week you'd have computer class. And then they would...
On those Macs with like the colored
Yeah.
Backs, yeah. We had the
But no,
same
this is
thing.
like what it was like just the green screen. Like it was just a green and black
Oh, the
screen,
pre
right?
one. Yeah, that's even the
Right?
older
Those
one.
were,
Yeah.
yeah, super old, man. And I mean, it was like third, fourth grade, something like that. So, man, it was super early. But man, it's so weird because as a kid, you're just like you're not thinking about what the heck this thing is that what they're trying to get me to use here. Like I didn't understand what
No,
it was
you're
at
just
the
like,
time.
oh, yeah, this is cool.
This is neat. I like
Yeah.
this. This is fun. It's I don't know. It's just
Did you
super cool
play
stuff.
Number Munchers on those Macs? Do you remember
I
that?
may have. Oregon Trail is probably the most memorable for me on those, but yeah, I very well have, but I just can't remember. So
There was like a old. I'll try one more. I'll go for one more swing. See if you remember it. There was an old like adventure game that on those Macs where there's two of them. One that was in like a castle. You just like pick the room. You go left or right, and you had choices.
hmm.
Then they came out with another one where you start out like in a carnival and you're shooting dolls, and that doll gets transported to like another world, and you have to walk around and click on things and figure out puzzles. Does that ring any bells?
No, no,
Dang it, because I
yeah,
bring
like I
that
said,
game up all the time, and I don't know how to find it. I've tried to find it.
yeah, right.
I keep bringing it up. If someone will remember, then I can remember the name and actually talk about it.
Yeah, and that's interesting. We went straight to Oregon Trail because like that, yeah, we were doing that in school, but the earliest memories of my gaming experiences were probably came from like was I was trying to think back to this when we planned on doing the podcast, but it was 1989 probably, and I was probably only 4 or 5 years old. Yeah,
Yeah,
5 years old.
four,
But my
four or
dad
five.
had a
Yeah.
computer. He was a computer guy. He was in IT already, and he had a flight simulator. It was a F-15 Strike Eagle 2, and I've looked it up recently, and yeah, it came out in 1989. I mean, you look at the graphics, and it's just these flat textures. Like it's just a one color texture, and
Oh, this looks dope. Yeah, 1989
yeah,
MS DOS.
yeah, MS DOS, man. So my dad had that, and he had like an old school joystick, and he would play it
Wow.
because he was doing some. I think he was doing some like contract work for the military at the time. And so I don't know. He was always interested in airplanes. He always dug. We always went to air shows as a kid. Watched the Blue Angels, Thunderbirds, all that stuff. Went out to like Point Magoo, um, where else? El Toro Marine Station. We would go to all those. And then I remember my dad had the sim, and so I'd always bug him to play it. Nag him and just annoy him to death about playing it. But just you don't necessarily want your kid to go on the computer alone. But yeah, it was cool, like learning all those commands, like learning how to type in how to start how to start the game and
Yeah.
all that was kind of confusing. So
Yeah, MS DOS.
but
You basically had to launch the program. You had to do like really simple code. Like here's the folder.
yep.
Here's the executable file name. Launch it. Yes. Enter. And if you typed anything wrong, it didn't work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And so I used MS DOS for a good number of years there while my dad was there, and that was pre-internet, man. Like that was before I remember us ever getting internet.
That's
And I remember,
definitely yeah.
yeah, I remember my dad sitting me down the first time that we got internet at the house. It was like 14.4, whatever the measurement is for internet speed. And he was just showing me. I was like into baseball at the time, and he's like, "Hey, check this out. You can see whenever the Dodgers are playing. Like you can see the whole schedule for the Dodgers." And I'm like, "What? That's insane. That's so cool." And
Yeah.
he's like, "Yeah, you can buy tickets on here." I'm like, "That's insane." So yeah, what's weird is I don't think that was till at least like 94, 95
Do you
when
remember
I saw the
any
internet. But
more of like these type of games before I got the internet on PC? Because definitely
yeah.
the first person that's brought
Oh,
this up.
yes, Prince of Persia.
Oh yeah, that's a great
Did you ever
one.
play Prince of Persia?
Yeah,
Oh
it
man,
was.
that was super fun.
It was kind of had like really hard laggy controls, but the reason it was so it was a big hit is because I don't know if it was the first game that used rotoscoping, but they actually took reference footage of all the moves in video and they just animated over the footage. And so it
Oh
had
yeah,
this
okay.
animation style that was like
Yeah,
really
that's right.
smooth that you didn't see in traditional sprite animation like Mario or
Yeah,
early
yeah.
games. And that I
Those were
remember that blowing me away.
yeah, like the way that I'm just kind of picturing in my head like the way his legs moved, when you would run with
Yeah.
him, and then like when you had to turn around, like it was this slow turnaround. I don't know. I can't remember much about it, to be honest. I haven't even thought about it until now.
It's super
So
hard. I remember being, this is so hard. And it had blood. I remember it was like one of the first games that had like
Yeah,
blood.
that's right.
I was like, ooh,
Following the
this is
spikes.
edgy.
That's right.
Yes.
Well, like they ended up making like a movie out of that later, right? Like as it like kind of relatively recently, they made a movie
Yeah.
out of it. So
They ended
that
up
franchise has been going
making.
for a while.
I think they ended up making 2 or 3 of those early 2D games, and then they had a Prince of Persia, a new basically series that started, I believe, on Xbox One and PS2.
Oh, that's right.
Prince
Yeah.
of Persia: Sands of Time, and then there was like Warrior Within, and I think there was 3 or 4 games, and then they had a Prince of Persia reboot that was like all cel-shaded graphics that came out on PS3. There was like 4 or 5 games, and then the movie with Jake Gyllenhaal came out, which I
Oh, wow. Okay.
and that's the recent one you're talking about. I tried it.
Yeah.
I made it like 25 minutes, and unfortunately,
Yeah, it's just isn't that weird because it seems like that would definitely be our market. Like we would be the market for that if
Yeah.
having played that as a kid. Just like a lot of these things are, like Stranger Things and how it's kind of marketed towards like 80s kids, kids from the 80s and stuff. I don't know what it was with Prince of Persia. I just never caught my eye or anything like that.
Did you
Never-
get
I
into
was never
Stranger
interested in
Things?
Chandler. Yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, totally, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
What would you rate Stranger Things? Like solid or like home run? Like not one of your favorite shows?
Oh yeah, I mean it's to be honest, I don't watch too much TV these days and like too many movies unless I know for a fact that I'm gonna like it. And that was Stranger Things is one of those shows. So yeah, I mean the music first of all. Actually, I think I'd read an article about it before it had come out, and they were talking about the music. I'm like, oh, why are they making a big deal about this music? And talking about these guys who live. I think they were from Austin, and they were like getting they would collect all these like really rare synthesizers. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. So then the show came out, and I'm like, whoa, the music for this is amazing.
Dope.
Like,
Yeah, it's
like
so dope.
every episode we watch the intro for the music.
Yes.
This is.
I always get mad at my wife. Don't skip the intro. I like the intro. I like the music. I like the title sequence.
Yeah.
Just let it play out. She
Which is
hates it.
crazy. I don't know if you remember. I don't know if you ever hung out with Rebecca Thomas, but she kind of came from our group of friends. But she directed one of the episodes in season 2.
What was the name again? That sounded familiar.
Rebecca Thomas.
Rebecca
Yeah,
Thomas.
she did. She went to. I think she went to BYU and did all her film school there and everything. But yeah, they had her.
That's awesome.
Direct. I
Shout
can't remember. Well, it's crazy because the episode that they did was like the one where 11 turns like punk rock, pretty much. Like she's hanging out with all the punk rock kids in season 2.
Oh, she goes to like different city and meets
Yeah.
the other girl. Yeah.
Yeah, don't want to spoil it, but yeah. So it was cool because Becca was like really into punk rock and all that stuff. And kind of that whole group of friends that were into that kind of music and stuff. But anyways, so
Well, shout
claim
out to
fame.
Rebecca Thomas.
Dude,
Props on
seriously,
directing
legit.
Stranger Things. That's awesome.
So
See,
yeah,
Utah's cool. We're cool. We got cool people.
man. Yeah, man.
We got Mike
totally.
Rushforth. He's pretty dope.
That-
Did you play on? I never played this F-15, but there's a really similar game that was like a race car game. And since your dad was in IT, did he have other games, or do you?
Indy 500
Yes.
race cars. Like I can't remember I think that's what it was called. Yeah.
Indy.
Yeah, I'm glad you're
500.
kind of like sparking my memory with these because I totally forgot about that.
Well,
one.
I was like always been fascinated by video games, and even games I didn't play. I'd always have friends that had different consoles, and I had a friend that was in a similar situation whose dad was a computer programmer for WordPerfect.
Oh, okay.
And all growing up, I never had a PC till I was basically in college when I got a laptop. All growing up, he was one of my friends. Oh yeah, this is it. This is crazy. Yeah.
That game was fun, man. That was a really cool game. I probably put a lot of time into that. So.
Yeah, he had this game, and he had like a stunt car game for MS-DOS. Let's see, stunt car MS.
I can't imagine that there were too many games even floating around at the time. So
Oh, this is it.
a lot of people probably
called-
had similar games, right?
Yep, Borderlands Software presents Stunts. I played this one a lot. Holy cow! Yeah, I guess you
that
can't.
up.
I need to share my. I need to
I
figure
can look
this
it
out.
up. I'm on the computer.
Yeah, check this out. Look up Stunts PC DOS on YouTube.
Oh yeah, here we go.
It's definitely something along the line of Indy 500. It was around the same time, and I had a friend who had basically a dad in the same situation. He always had the best PC at the time. And what was cool about this game, Stunts, depending on video you watch, you could build your own tracks based on a grid. So,
Okay.
that was crazy. PC back in the day was killing it, but it just had the barrier to entry was expensive, and you had to be a programmer. There was always problems. So a lot of kids, unless they had a parent or a brother, didn't get exposed to these games.
Yeah, it was a lot of, it was definitely a big learning curve for that. But luckily, my dad was into it at the time. So he got me into that. And then, shortly thereafter, I'm trying to remember what year we got it. It must have been like 90 or 91 when we got our first Nintendo.
Yeah,
so.
That's generally. Did you play any of the adventure game? Did you keep playing PC, or once you got the Nintendo?
It was always kind of. Yeah, it was like a running theme, like the computer, because the computer was like somewhat off limits because it was my dad's for work.
Yes.
So I was like kind of a special time, it was like, oh, okay, yeah, you can play this game. And it was like under his supervision, and he would kind of watch you as you're playing it or whatever. But then once we got the regular Nintendo, we always called it regular Nintendo over the years. But yeah, we kind of, when we got that was our thing, and I remember I had to be six years old. And, it's going through a pretty crazy life situation where my parents ended up getting divorced, and we lived with my grandparents at the time. So me and my sister lived together in my grandparents' house, and my grandma would go play tennis every morning. So my sister would watch me in the morning. So all summer, me and my sister would just play Nintendo for a few hours in the morning. And so that was, it's weird just thinking about all, those 3 years of just playing Nintendo. I mean, every summer was full of video games from there on out.
That's what,
from there on out. But that specific 3 years were really big.
What games stand out to you in those 3 years? What would be the big three?
Obviously, Super Mario, or Mario Brothers, Duck Hunt. The ones that the one that got me into skating was Skate or Die.
Yes, one other person has brought that up. My cousin had that game, and I liked it because you had like that little screen where you could choose like what stunt. You could go like left, top, right, middle, left, middle, right.
Yeah.
And they had like a bunch of different versions of. Well, there's I guess Skate or Die 1 and 2 mixed up. Let's look it up. But
that's a good question. Yeah, because I don't remember which one I was rocking.
Yeah, they have half pipes. They had. Did you ever play California Games?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, I played that on Atari, right? Yeah.
It might have been on Atari. You had an Atari?
Yeah, California. I didn't have one, but I had a friend in elementary school who had one, and I played California Games. And I remember like, wait, how have I never? It's kind of a little bit later. Maybe like I was like 4th, 5th grade, and I saw this that my friend had this because Atari was kind of old at the time, But I was like, dang, this game's amazing. Like, how have I never played this game?
Yeah, California Games
hacky
was
sack
dope. I'm actually watching the hacky sack right now. It's
right.
Yeah. Then they had surfing. Cool. And,
surfing. Yep.
Rollerblading. The chick on the jump over stuff. Yep, there she is.
Dude, that's such good game. I don't understand. Man,
this game was. They had the BMX game, and the disc. I didn't like the disc golf one. I never really played that one, but the rest of them I played.
And like I said, I didn't put a ton of hours into it just because it was my friend's house, and like his mom was kind of strict about it. So I only got to play that one a little bit. But yeah, Skate or Die, Contra was a big one.
Yeah, Contra's a big one.
Contra, trying to think, man. Ones that like this was one actually, Little League Baseball Championship Series.
I think I remember seeing that. I have a
thing. We fast forward later in like 4th, 5th, 6th, even middle school. Like we would set up the old Nintendo again just to play Little League Baseball because that's how good it was to us. Like we absolutely love that game. So
I do remember this. I think I had a friend that had this in Excite Bike.
Excite Bike was awesome. I remember loving that game.
Yeah. Excite Bike, you could also build your own.
You could build big ramps and stuff like that, and that was like very customizable. And that was it's very satisfying in that regard. I remember.
So those are kind of the big games. How long did you have? Is there anything that you remember on PC that you did get a chance to play, even though it was sort of off limits during this time?
That's all that's kind of ringing a bell right now. But the theme here that kind of started in in '89 was the flight simulator.
The flight simulator,
like the military flight sims.
I do think that's sort of poetic because I know you got into Flight Simulator in college. I remember you and Josh Dickens
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So I thought okay, it's going to be Flight Simulator in college that sort of prompted him, but I wasn't expecting you to be like that. First memory was going to be.
Oh no, early on.
Full circle, baby.
Microsoft Flight Simulator 1995, So that was a big one I played. And I think I'm trying to think when I got my first laptop. I was, gosh, man, I must have been like a freshman or just maybe like eighth grade or something like that. And I remember I installed Microsoft Flight Simulator 95 and this other one called Falcon 4.0. So I'm skipping a generation here because there's a whole like Super Nintendo phase in here too, and PlayStation 1 phase. But
That's fine. We'll get to it.
we can go back to that. But yeah, for the flight sim stuff, Microsoft Flight Simulator 95 and Falcon 4.0. I remember being a freshman in high school, and for spring break, you had the whole week off or whatever. And I remember spending an entire week in my room alone playing Falcon 4.0, as an F-16. And I mean, still to that day, what's so crazy, I don't know, we can look up when that game came out, but that game is still around today, and there's still a cult following, and they're still updating it. So they released all the code, they like let it out to everyone, and so there's just guys that like put in their own time and put in their own free time and their skills and knowledge, and they have made it and updated it enough to where they can still play it, and they have like the campaign system on there is just the most amazing thing you could, as far as flight sims go. I still have it installed and I'll play it every once in a while. But
pretty cool, even though it's old. Like the way the cockpit is sort of a 2D render. Then they have like a crude 3D model for the plane when you zoom out, and then it looks like they have some low res like actual satellite footage mapped on the ground. Like it looks pretty cool.
Yeah, that was probably one of the bigger flight simulators for me. But then now they've kind of the new iterations are called Falcon BMS. If you look up the Falcon BMS, you can see what they've done with the graphics, and the newer graphics. It's good enough. I mean, that's kind of their gripe with it. People who are into military flight sims still, their gripe is that the graphics aren't as good as another one that we play called DCS, Digital Combat Simulator.
I'm checking out Falcon BCS right now. This looks
yeah, BMS. Yep.
BMS. Yeah, it's like the cockpit looks amazing.
But isn't that crazy? It's cool that like they released all that code at one point. Microprose, who made that, they ended up releasing all that code, and they just let kind of release that to people, and they did their thing with it. And all the people who are messing with that code now, like they're not getting any money for it. They're just they're doing it for the community.
For the love of the community.
Exactly.
Yeah, so we can get into flight sim, and we can go back to SNES and PS1, but it seems like from you and Josh in college, and you following the flight sim, and the fact that there's these games where you have these community projects. How big is the flight sim community? Like how many? I mean, I know businesses use it, I guess, and airlines use it to train. How many people are playing it as a hobby?
So, and this kind of goes back to, I'll kind of backtrack here. I was already working for the airlines in like 2012, 2013, and I got into a game called Arma 3.
Oh, yeah.
I'm trying to think what year it came out, like 14 or 15, I think. And when that came out, I was like, I just kind of started playing again and started taking my computer on the road. And then I got into a milsim group, which basically like they're super serious. I mean, they like you get in and they have like veterans, military veterans. They get in there and they know the tactics and everything. And you get in there and it's amazing because that's like a military simulator, but on the ground, with like ground troops and stuff. And I remember thinking, man, this is cool. Like the organization that they put together and the fact that these military veterans are able to use their real world experience to teach us who don't have that experience how to do these things. And then they tell their stories of being in Afghanistan and Iraq and all this cool stuff. And, after doing that for a year or two, I'm like, wait, I used to be really into flight sims, and I've always been on and off with flight sims, like you saw in college, right? Like that I was using those during my training. But then I was like, well, I think I feel like I have something to offer here in this area now that I'm an actual airline pilot and all that stuff. And so, what kind of fascinated me pretty early on was, what's the potential with this technology, like that, something that we might consider as a game and a fun thing to do online, right? To fly together and to do these things. How realistic could we make it to real life and what we do? And could this be of value in training, right? So I had this whole idea, I had this whole business idea that I came up with to teach guys online remotely. And while it wouldn't count for real life, experience or anything like that, but to work with a real certified flight instructor, which I had done, I taught people to fly real airplanes. Could I do this on the computer and do it justice, and actually have some value, add some value to them, to people who are getting into their own training, right, into their own real world training. So, could I prepare this guy? Like Josh, he went to ATP school, which is an accelerated flight training school, which is kind of regarded as it's pretty difficult to get through once you're there, because it's just you eat, sleep, and drink,
Yeah,
flight
flights,
training.
that's what you
So it's
do.
a lot. And a lot of kids that go there don't necessarily know what they're getting themselves into. So if you could have spent a little bit of time, maybe just, maybe just a couple months, and a few hours, a week with a certified flight instructor in a flight sim, how beneficial could that be to you before you actually walk into flight school? If that
So
makes
the
sense.
idea
So
is basically like, if I'm interested in becoming a pilot, or maybe I'm a really enthusiastic hobbyist with some money, some disposable income, I can get online with you in real time, share my screen, whatever, play Flight Simulator, and you can walk me through what everything is. And
yep.
assuming, because it seems like these flight simulators are, how accurate are they to actually flying a plane?
I mean, it's pretty dang close. Beside there are limitations, obviously, but as far as the feel, the kinesthetic senses that you would feel in a real airplane, and the G's that are pushing on you and things like that, like there's definitely, you can't replace that. They try to mimic that, right, in these full motion simulators that I train in, and that was the idea that I'm like, wait, when you sit back and think about it, my all my initial training in the airlines was in a big simulator, right? You go through ground training, and you go through a couple weeks of ground training, and then they put you in the simulator for a couple weeks as well. And then you go through hours and hours in training, and going through failures, and it's, the whole cockpit's all laid out just like your real cockpit would be, with some limitations, right? But I'm like, wait, all we're doing here is essentially playing a video game. And what kind of like gave me that, what made me realize that was one time, I'm trying to work on this maneuver, let's say a single engine ILS, so you're trying to, it's simulating that you've failed an engine on the airplane, and you're trying to come in to shoot and approach and land. Very common scenario that we deal with in the big simulators, right? I'm like, one guy was like, okay, hey man, like just relax and just play the video game. That was his advice. And you're like,
Yeah.
oh, like I know how to do this, okay, let's just do it, and let's just play the video game, and so, yeah, then that's what so that's kind of like something I still kind of tell myself when I go into the sim, like, oh, don't overthink it, don't analyze all this stuff, just play the video game. And I would kind of tell my wife that sometimes, because she's not super fond of video games, and so I'm like, wait, I am a
Surprise,
pilot.
surprise.
This is this is what I say. I'm like, I am a pilot because of video games, and I consider myself a good, decent pilot because of video games, because of the hand-eye coordination that it takes, and the quote unquote multitasking that you kind of have to.
So, have you ever, that specific scenario that you were training for in the sim, have you ever had that scenario in a real flight?
Not that specific one, no, but I have had real emergencies happen, and that have helped. And the simulator can help for those situations, because when you've experienced them beforehand, and you've seen, how to handle those in that situation, in kind of a closed environment, and then when they happen in real life, you fall back on your training. What's the quote that, like, you kind of fall back on the level of your training. I don't know
Yes.
I'm
Under
butchering that,
stress, you
but
go whatever you have ingrained in perfectly.
exactly. So
That's
if you
what's going
haven't
to happen.
practiced it, or you don't really know how you're going to react. But and even then, when you go through the training, you always wonder, hey, how am I going to react in real life? But yeah, and in those situations where I've had an emergency, I feel like I've reacted, or dealt with them very well.
Well,
And
you're not dead, so obviously you did something right.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, exactly. So,
That's
but
not.
simulators,
That's
absolutely. I mean,
crazy.
huge. And at this time, when I was kind of making that transition from that Arma game to, I was like getting these ideas about how I may be useful in the flight sim community. I started looking into the different communities that were going on, and I found Twitch. And I didn't even know what Twitch was, but I found Twitch in my research
Ah,
that I was doing for that. And I found, oh man, there's this whole world of flight sim guys that are super serious about it. And and they're good at it. They're all computer guys, a lot of engineers, just from all walks of life, that they spend a lot of their free time on the computer doing flight sims. And I was baffled at how much these guys knew about aviation. Yeah, I have a degree in aviation, and that's why I know these things, right? But these guys they might as well have the degree that I have, or even more, because it's their passion and they learned it all through the computer, which is pretty insane. So,
So that kind of makes sense why you think, okay, a valuable product would be if someone is either really enthusiastic or thinking about joining flight school. If you go into, now that I understand how accurate these are or effective they are to replicating real life flight situations, if you have 1,000 hours on the sim, that translates to almost 1,000 hours before you even go into flight school.
Yeah, somewhat. Yeah, I wouldn't discount real experience. You know what I mean? But definitely, like your real experience in whatever thing you're doing really does matter, right? But the time that you spend in the sim is super valuable in that regard too. It's very valuable in what I do every day to day, right? And so this is what's crazy is that the FAA, right, the governing body for aviation in the United States, they think that simulator that I use when I get trained for work is so realistic and so immersive and so such a powerful educational tool that my very first flight in the jet, right? I mean, I've never flown a jet before, right? At this point, my very first flight in the jet is with paying passengers in the back.
Oh,
Like I
so
don't just
you don't even get like a dry run for your first time.
Now, in that situation, you have a special captain who has been trained to teach in the jet, right?
Yes.
But I've gone through all my training, all my flows, all the procedures and everything, and it's very choreographed how to get that plane up and running and do a flight from point A to point B, right? But the FAA, they think that those full motion simulators, they call them level D simulators, are accurate enough to where I could jump into the jet and fly paying passengers in the back on the first time. And I don't think a ton of people realize that. And I'm not saying that because it's scary or anything like that. It's totally safe. I mean, it's like I said, there's definitely a special captain. There's someone there with you who's training you that day. But I mean, that's your first flight is with paying passengers in the back.
I'm watching some footage of this level D. It's like a full cockpit and all the windows. It's like an amusement park setup, like full motion machine. This is awesome.
And what's so weird to me is that the graphics in those simulators, I mean, they're huge. I mean, they're pushing these graphics to these huge screens, right? But the graphics on my computer, right, on my computer-based flight simulators, I feel like they're higher fidelity than those full motion simulators, which is crazy. So as far as the terrain goes and all that, but you can't really replace. Some guys, they'll build full on sim pits in their house with all the knobs and switches and get it super accurate. I don't have that. Most guys don't have that are into flight sims. But
I've never seen someone with like a hydraulic sim pit like this where it's on, can mimic the movements. But my drum teacher growing up was this hardcore Microsoft Flight Simulator fan. And I was always building him new rigs because he didn't know much about computers, but he had money. So I was like, I'm going to build a new Microsoft rig. What parts should I get? I help him put his gear together. And then he would get it set up to a bunch of stuff I didn't understand. But early days, we're talking like 90s, early 2000s. He'd have like 6 screens wrapped kind of set up in a mock cockpit. And he'd have like foot pedals and all these things like peripherals. And he went deep down the Flight Simulator rabbit hole. And I think he ended up taking like, what are those little tiny propeller airplanes called? Like private.
Just like single engine, Cessna or whatever. Yeah.
I think he got into those small, like he got a private flight instructor and would fly those little planes. That's crazy. So, but I thought he's the only person I knew. I just thought he was one dude. But that doesn't surprise me on Twitch. You're going to have this. There's a community for every game and every hobby now.
Yeah, and it's weird because you kind of just have this language that you speak with each other, and it's even the guys that are doing it in real life, can get along, really well with the guys who don't have 1 hour of real flight time, but they've spent a ton of time in the sim. They know all about
how to fly these
planes. They
They
can
can
hang,
hang.
man. And
Yeah, that's
yeah, and
awesome.
that's what's so crazy is like, these guys that I was meeting as I was doing this research, was just impressing me so much how much they knew about flying. I'm like, dang, dude, these guys, like, man, like knowledge wise, like they know more than me. What the heck, dude? Like, and I do this in real life, so it's just funny. Like, there's no real limit to the knowledge that you can pick up through the computer and whatever it is you want to do. But yeah, so I started kind of learning that and picking that up, and then I started coming across these add-ons for flight simulators. One in particular, probably the most beneficial for real world flying, I would see it, is this company called Pilot Edge, and they offer real life air traffic control services for flight simulators. Yeah, so if you pull up pilotedge.net, you can kind of see what they
Yeah.
do, but basically, it's just this piece of software you download. It connects with either Microsoft Flight Simulator 10, X-Plane, or even now Digital Combat Simulator, which I help do the testing for.
Oh,
Um,
so you have to actually work with like a
oh,
simulated traffic controller while you play
exactly,
your sim.
exactly. So I have to, when I spawn in the airplane, I have to
Oh.
spawn in the right spot on the airport. I've got to know how to talk to air traffic control. I have to dial in the right frequency in the airplane. I have to have the real charts out, just like I would in real life. And here I can talk to a guy who is trained just as much as a real life air traffic controller. Some of the guys that actually do it are real life air traffic controllers, and a lot of them aren't. They're just enthusiasts
Yeah.
that are, but they're really really good at it, and the realism is just insane. But when I found that really changed everything, because I knew about another product called VatSim, which is the same idea, but it's kind of more open source, and it's not. I wouldn't say it's cool. It's definitely a cool thing that they put together, um, but someone actually monetized it and called it Pilot Edge, and it's the product is much much better. So the end product, because as far as if like let's say UK, we're gonna go, hey, I want to get my private pilot's license. I'd be like, okay, let's set up your simulator and let's get you on Pilot Edge. So to invest, you invest $20 a month in the subscription for this service, and what it'll do is when you get into the real plane, you'll already know how to talk on the radio with real air traffic controllers. You already know exactly what to say, and there's been countless testimonials and kind of examples of this, and I met a lot of these guys. I've seen a lot of these guys who started out on a simulator on the computer. I've met them on before they ever had 1 hour of flight time, and then they go get in the airplane and they can do everything. There's still some things they have to learn, and as far as how the feeling of the airplane and different things, but a lot of that, like they've already kind of overcome a lot of those difficulties in learning. So the payoff here, right? Let's say, because it's 40 hours is your minimum that you have to get your private pilot's license. There's all these other requirements within that, but the lower that you keep that, the less it costs, right?
Yeah.
So there's definitely a cost savings there. If you're looking, if you're looking to go make it as a career or whatever, you can get through your training quicker because you've used these computer-based solutions. So.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's the common theme with the internet is it's good for most industries, but the barrier to entry or the barrier to knowledge and quality knowledge is like people always joke YouTube University, but
Yeah.
every time someone's asked me, "Oh, I want to do a podcast. I want to learn about doing music. Should I go to this?" I'm like, "No, do not go to school. Do not do anything. If you have any sort of discipline, just start watching YouTube videos."
Yeah.
Like,
Yep.
you can get top tier, like top tier music production instruction for absolutely free.
Absolutely. Yeah, and then same thing with flying and becoming a pilot. There's so many videos out there, and there's so many. I know I've actually met a lot of other real pilots that fly for the airlines, fly for corporate gigs and stuff like that. Who have that's how they got into flying, was through flight simulator stuff, and made good friends with these guys. And I got some stuff in the pipeline that maybe you can link up later, but with Twitch and all that, and because a lot of these flight simulator guys, they value what we bring to the sim. While I might not be as versed and know my way around the computer as much as some of these engineers and programmers and all that stuff who are into flight sim, they help me with that stuff, right? But I can help them be like, hey, this is kind of what we do day to day. This is how we do things procedurally in the plane that
Yeah.
I fly. this is how things work or whatever. There is a level that, we can kind of trade information in that regard. So yeah, super cool, man.
So
It's
you're
fun.
basically what you're saying is there's guys out there that are hardcore enthusiasts that are interacting with you, people like you,
Yep.
and this Pilot Edge and with Flight Simulator, and they have so many hours. Is it, they if they wanted to make the transition to a commercial pilot or a private pilot, they could they could get it done a lot quicker and easier. They're pretty much already there. They just need to connect it with some real life experience.
Exactly. And that was the idea that I'd come up with, and I've kind of abandoned the whole business side of it. But
Why would you do that?
for
It's such a
time
good
constraints and stuff
idea.
like that.
It makes total
It
sense to
is.
me.
There's still limitation though. There's still limitation with some of the technology, and that's with the remote. It's shared cockpit, so the ability to go and sit in the actual airplane with another person and have all of the buttons synced up and everything,
Oh,
all
I
that.
see.
There's still some limitations to that. It's getting better, but at the time, 5 years ago, when I was thinking about this stuff, there was some limitations with it.
Could you
And
do something like this, really rudimentary, where they just screen share while they play the game and you just tell them what to do?
that was one of the solutions. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was one of the solutions that we had come up with. I wasn't too jazzed about it, but I've done that before. Yeah, and using that as an educational tool. Like I don't want to downplay that because it's definitely very, very powerful. But it was just one of the roadblocks I kind of ran
Yeah.
into. And I'm not a programmer and all that to be able to fix those problems basically. So, but they're getting there. They're
If you
definitely
had
getting
some
there.
money, you could possibly build like a VR mod for
Yeah.
Flight Simulator, where that you and if you both had a VR set, then you could sit in. Oh, is that Oculus?
Yeah, the Rift S. I picked it up. Yeah.
Yeah, and you mainly sim with it, Flight Simulator.
Yeah. So I use that one basically for this other one called Digital Combat Simulator that I fly. And they just, as of this year, they came out with the F-14 Tomcat. So all of us 80s babies,
Yeah,
like I'm also a pilot because of Top Gun, right? I mean, but so they came out with the F-14, and I mean the level of fidelity that they released this module to is amazing. I mean, you have to know how to start an F-14 to run this thing. Like you've got to be able to know how the systems work. You've got to know how to start the jet, the engines, and how to run the weapon systems and all that kind of stuff. So, and then what's so cool about this module in particular is that they've got the shared cockpit down. So you can have the guy in the back, your Goose, right? Your Rio.
yeah.
I'm assuming you
Dude,
saw
the graphics on this
watched
are
Top Gun.
amazing.
Yeah, so this is another kind of side of the flight sim community that I dabble, well, more than dabble in it, but that I love. I do quite a bit of DCS streaming. I have a bunch of DCS videos on YouTube, and this is what was cool. I worked with Keith Smith from Pilot Edge, who's the owner and creator of Pilot Edge. I worked with him to do a lot of the testing for DCS on Pilot Edge. So what we would do is we go get in an A10 Warthog, and we could link up to this air traffic control network. Let's say I spawn in Nellis Air Force Base here in Vegas, and I could talk to a real air traffic controller and be in my real, in my very realistic A10 Warthog, and go fly a flight with real
How
procedures.
different is this military stuff compared to commercial? Is it a totally new learning curve, or is there some
Yeah, it's
overlap?
different. Very, very, very different. Yeah. Very different. So, I mean, a lot of the terminology when you're talking to air traffic control is somewhat the same, very similar. There's definitely a lot of carryover. A lot of military pilots and air traffic controllers, they go into the civilian world and do the same thing, right? Like a lot of airline pilots came from military.
Yeah, that makes
but
sense.
yeah, they're somewhat different things, whereas you're in a single seat fighter, let's say, as opposed to being in a multi-pilot airliner. It's a different type of flying, especially working with another person and they call it CRM, cockpit resource or crew resource management. It's this whole science behind how pilots work together and how we communicate.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the powerful aspect that I see with flight simulators and the technology that we have now is like we can work together on a computer. Like that's kind of what I'm working on right now is I'm working with a couple other Airbus pilots and this shared cockpit technology to learn real airline procedures that we do day to day and do them in the simulator. and talking to air traffic control, and teaching these guys who really do want to learn that. It's a fun thing. It's like it's kind of funny because it's like that's what I do for work, and then
You go
I'll
home and
come
do
back and
more.
I'll kind
You
of do it
just
on the
love
computer.
flying, baby. You love
But
it.
but that's what's cool about aviation. We don't do aviation because we want to make a ton of money. We do it because we love it. It's a passion. And to me, like if I'm not sharing aviation, I don't teach anymore. I taught to build my hours to get to the airlines, but I miss teaching so bad. I really, really enjoyed that aspect of flying. So this is kind of another way for me to be able to maybe teach a little bit. I mean, I learn a ton. Don't get me wrong. Like I said, these guys in some cases know a lot more than I do, but I can bring that real world element to them, and then they have a lot to offer to me too. Yeah, so it's a really cool kind of trade off, and with information and stuff like that. So
This digital combat simulator combining with a Rift, a VR headset looks. I mean, it looks awesome.
yeah, and so a lot of my research, when I was going down, I didn't know where the simulators were at the time. 5 years ago when I was looking into this stuff, I didn't know, what was the good simulator and where, did this shared cockpit technology even work and all that kind of stuff. But as I went and I started testing the simulators, I was like, man, DCS is actually probably my favorite simulator. And I always leaned towards military flight simulators, even though I didn't go to do the military thing. It was the more fun one to me because it's, people typically like to do on the sim what they don't do in real life, if that makes sense. So,
Yeah.
So I kind of leaned a lot towards DCS and still do. But I'm like, but the way that sim is programmed and everything, I feel like it's kind of the smoothest and best built sim for teaching. And that could be, I wanted to use that one to teach, but they didn't have the type of aircraft that were applicable to what I'm certified to teach, if that makes sense.
But they already have that shared package thing in VR figured out, right?
Yeah,
Because you can do the Goose. So if they had the commercial aircraft, that would be a great. It would link up your two things together.
Exactly. That's kind of the hope. That's my hope, is that they come out with some more. They call it general aviation or GA aircraft that are like the single engine Cessnas or the twin turbine engine stuff. I don't the civilian side of things. They don't have much of that quite yet in DCS. So
if you could fly any aircraft from any of the simulators in real life that you haven't flown, what would it be?
Oh, that I have. Say that again. Like
so
that I haven't.
Whether it's like military or casual or a retro plane, anything that you've played on sim that you're pretty good at, but you've never had a chance to actually fly in real life, what would it be?
Oh man, I really dig the F-18 Hornet. I think that's like that's an amazing airplane, and they have that for DCS. It's a Navy aircraft. They fly on and off the aircraft carriers. The aircraft carrier is really like an amazing thing to me. And so what's cool is I have a video that I put up on YouTube where I flew with a guy at my airline who was an F-18 pilot, right? And now he's an airline pilot. And we kind of connected on sim stuff because he's like, hey, I built a sim in my house and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, oh, that's cool. I do this digital combat simulator thing, and they're actually coming out with the F-18. Like, you should check this out. And so I got in and I showed him. I got him on Discord, and he's the older guy, so it was kind of a learning curve for him. But I showed him how we were testing digital combat simulator with Pilot Edge, and man, he was so impressed. Like, he was just flabbergasted at how far the technology's come. He flew the F-18 in the 90s, but anyways, that's probably, like, if I had the chance to go fly one, probably fly that one. Do you of the planes that I've flown in the sim? So.
With your current simulator experience, would you feel comfortable getting in one of those and just going for it?
That's a good question. I would know how to start it up, that's for sure. And there's a lot going on that, as far as like ground crew and things, on the ground that you would need to have in place. So that there's definitely those limitations. But, assuming all those were in place and not necessarily knowing exactly their procedures and how they do things precisely,
Yeah.
I could probably get the thing started and take off, if that makes sense. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I could do that. But if I really did want to learn it to the level that they do know how to fly it, which is a group that I'm in, this group called the 57th, where they try to learn it to that level, where like they're doing the procedures and they're doing, they're flying as realistically as possible. So I nerd out on a lot of that stuff, but it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. It takes a lot of study. So a lot of hours that you got to
This
put
isn't
into.
casual video gaming by any
What's
stretch of
that?
the means. It's not
No,
casual
no,
gaming by any stretch of the
it's
means.
not. And what's funny is you kind of think like, oh, just, you'll get into like a multiplayer. Let's say you get into a multiplayer server for DCS, which I think is still relatively a free for all, right? Like you're kind of going around dogfighting and all that. It's not little kids that are in there, right? These are like adults who have careers, have kids, and all that kind of stuff. Who now kind of have the money to get all the peripherals and the
Yeah, yeah.
joysticks and the throttles. And I mean, like the Warthog throttle system is $500. It's like $400 or $500. So just the throttle system, and then they get these rudder pedals, and they have either a track IR. I'll show you this thing here. Yeah, but this is called the track IR, and
What does
it's
that
just
do?
a little infrared camera. And what I would do is I grab this. This is like the precursor to VR, and I would put this little thing on my hat, this little sensor, and what it does is it
Oh,
sees what my head movements on the computer. And so when I'm in the sim, hold on, let me put this back here. When I'm in the sim, it'll move. I can move my head around like this, on the bill of the hat, and it's just so much easier to move around and click around in the cockpit rather
yeah,
than
yeah,
having to use the hat on the joystick.
yeah, yeah. That makes total sense.
So, yeah, and you can use it for all the other GA flight sims that I fly, all the civilian stuff, but in particular for this military stuff when you're dogfighting, and you need to turn around and look behind you because you're trying to get the guy off your six. That's where this comes into play. And then even then, like, and I just barely invested in this, but the VR headsets where it's crazy because the head movements, you've got to turn your head 180 degrees to track the guy behind you.
Yeah, yeah.
Or when you're flying formation, like you gotta keep your eye on the other guy and your head's kind of turned to the side. Anyways, it's pretty cool. It's a different level even with the VR headset where you get the depth perception because when you're using the track IR, you just have the 2D panel
That's
and you're
yeah,
trying
yeah,
to
yeah,
fly
yeah, yeah.
formation, and there's so much. You're trying to do air-to-air refielding where the depth perception really does matter. So, anyways, this is kind of my whole area where I'm not an expert in this stuff. I'm not
Ha
by any
ha!
means,
You
but
are so deep down the rabbit hole. You don't even know how deep you're down the rabbit hole, baby.
I know
You're
I sound
deep.
crazy. So
I mean, I'm
yeah,
sure there's people that are deeper because there always is. But to the average outside person, you are balls deep into flight sim.
yeah, right.
Yeah,
Well,
it's
and
awesome.
this is what's crazy is like these products that we're using, right? DCS, X-Plane, all these simulators that we're using, they're they've they only exist because they were commercial products for big businesses. I feel like for let's say like let's say I'm Airbus, right? The big behemoth of an aircraft manufacturer, right? Just like Boeing, and I build a big simulator, right? The software that goes in that, right? They've paid all these people, they paid this company to come up with that software, right? But then what these companies typically do is they end up turning that software and they bring it to the market for the average consumer.
It's like they could
That's
double
the
dip
case with
on it.
that's the case with Arma, right? Arma 3. That's what it is. It comes from a piece of software called VBS.
I did.
And what it is, it's a piece.
Ah,
It's a military simulator. And so what was cool is when in the group, this is where I was kind of like I went down the rabbit hole. Was one of the guys in our group was a contractor for the army. He was former military, had served in Afghanistan and everything, and he ran the simulator for the U.S. Army. And it's called VBS in its commercial form. But then what they do is they take it to the market and they called it Arma 3. So
I didn't. I had no idea. I thought Arma 3 was just some people that were way in. They just set out to make the most accurate possible simulator, but it was totally on the commercial side. I didn't know it
I think
started out.
I'm not an expert in this area either, but I think that like kind of the base code and the base idea of what they were doing came from VBS,
Yeah.
and then they turn it into Arma. So there's a lot of work on that end to get it, to work on a regular PC and all that, and get it to the point where we could all use it. But the other big example of this is with Pilot Edge in particular, where they have these commercial accounts where, let's say there's a flight, like I was talking about, those full level full motion simulators, right? What they'll do is they'll pipe Pilot Edge comms into those big simulators, right?
Uh,
And then they'll run scenarios on those guys, and they'll, that's that's the one piece that's missing with the airlines as far as that element of realism, is that we don't have realistic air traffic control communications in those big simulators. So that's kind of what Pilot Edge, that's kind of their real big push, and where I think they make the
Because
majority of their money
they
is with those
if
commercial
they get
accounts.
adopted by all the airlines, they're making some cash at
Oh
that point.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah, and they're going to
yeah.
grow, and that's like I would love to see them grow. But it takes airlines are trying to penny pinch, just like any other business. But some of the other smaller, I feel like smaller businesses have kind of seen the light and seen the power that the air traffic control, that air kind of service can do for their pilots. So, but anyways, this is just an example of what the power of this technology, and how we're bringing, video games kind of into the real world and how we interact with it. I don't know. It's just really fascinating to me.
I
Yeah.
wanted to ask about. So I heard a little bit of chatter on a handful of podcasts about the two Boeing planes that went down semi-recently, like the last year or two. And from
Yeah.
my understanding, it was a software update that was pushed, combined with a malfunctioning some sort of part that said how the plane detected it, where its angle or its levelness, and the two of
Yeah.
those together made the plane think that it was going up or like not going the right direction. So they took off and they went right back down. And I heard this podcast all about they were talking about just software and AI and society all running on clouds in the future and the sort of things that can happen. And they just used this particular example of because they also talk about Tesla and how every Tesla is connected to the cloud and they know where you're at
Yeah.
and all this stuff. And that's really good and safe, but then you also have this problem where sometimes a bug can happen. All software has bugs, and things like this are going to continue to happen. And we're probably going to have to develop new ways of pushing out software for things like planes, like with a lot of redundancy and a lot of fail safes.
Yeah, and a lot of that does kind of go over my head. But yeah, I mean that whole Max debacle with Boeing and everything. I'm not by any means the an authority on this or anything, but the MCAS system was what was going wrong with them, and it was thinking that the plane was stalling, and so it was trying to. What it is it's a protection system that they built into the plane, which Airbus is kind of renowned for this, is that they have these protection systems in the plane that well basically if we made a big mistake, it can help us. It can help us like give us some time to recover from a specific situation, right? Or not
Yes.
get us into big trouble. Whereas Boeing, for the most part, like they've kind of stayed away from these things, but that's where the technology goes, right? So this is kind of a newer system for them, and it was obviously going wrong. It was confused. The system was confused, and it was thinking that it was stalling when it wasn't in fact stalling, and it was trying to lower the nose on them and it wasn't allowing the pilots to override those systems. So we're taught to be able to override those protection systems if need be. So yeah,
That's what I
it's
wanted
kind of
to
the whole.
ask. Because, like,
Yeah.
wouldn't you always want to have a loophole where if you have a computer system, wouldn't you always want to have some way where the pilot can manually control everything? And why wouldn't
Yes.
they have that on this newer software update?
Yeah. I'm like I said, I'm not the authority on that. I probably should stay away from commenting on that altogether. But
But I wanted to
um,
ask because I went to Italy with my wife like pretty quickly after that happened, and she
yeah.
was freaking out, and I just started getting to my paranoid brain, and I was just like, and I remember I'm like, okay, if the same thing happens, it's going to happen right after takeoff. So we did take off and we started going. In that first like 20 minutes, it did give me some fear. I was kind of like, oh, I love my kids. I don't want to die. Please don't die. Please don't die. And then I eventually got over it. It was fine. But
Sure. No, and it's just one of those things. It's like when you're not. I think there's two aspects to this, and two theories I have as to why people are so afraid of flying, is because one, they're not in control, right?
Yeah,
it's like
definitely.
being a backseat pilot, and you can't even see out the front. Like that's what kind of messes with me even sometimes. Like I can't see out the front. I don't know what's happening. So what's happening? And then it's a thing that they don't understand, right? They don't know how to operate that airplane. They don't know how aviation works. They don't know how the air traffic control system works. There's so many unknowns and so many mysteries to it all that, yeah, man, like that's going to be kind of scary because you don't know how it works. But once you understand how it works and you realize to the level that we're trained at, you realize that there's so many different redundant systems. There's so many, things that there's mistakes that have happened that that we've already learned from. I mean, it's man, knock on wood. I think in the U.S. we haven't had a fatality in a long time. I think the last one was that Southwest one, where it was just a freak thing that happened that
Yeah.
where that lady got pulled out of the window. But anyways, it's very
No
very
big deal.
safe.
She just flew out of a window up in
Well,
the atmosphere.
I didn't mean to talk about that
I
so
know, I'm just
nonchalantly,
kidding.
but yeah, very serious thing. But
I think a big thing that scares people, at least for me, is I know statistically, and I was trying to talk to my wife about it. Look, you're way more likely to get in a car wreck.
absolutely,
Like by a magnitude of hundreds of whatever, logarithm 10, I don't even know, by a lot.
yeah.
Way more likely. But
In fact, I'm more nervous to drive on the freeway around all
Yes.
those other cars. Yeah,
and that makes sense because you are actually flying a lot and nothing happens. You have this experience where the average person flies occasionally, but they drive all the time. And even though you hear the statistics, I know that driving is statistically more dangerous. I'm driving every day, nothing happens, and I'm used to it.
Yeah.
And so I'm used to taking that statistical risk and realizing most of the time odds are going to play out on my behalf, and everything's going to
Yeah.
be fine. But when you're not used to it on the plane, and you also know, okay, it's 1 in a bajillion chance, but if it goes wrong, it goes wrong.
yeah.
Where people do occasionally survive even really bad car crashes, definitely fender
Yeah.
benders. Where is someone surviving a plane crash? I don't know the history. I'm sure it's happened, but it happens a lot less.
Yeah, because there's a whole element. There's a whole different element. There's a whole different. The whole 3D element.
Yeah.
And now you're in the air. You've got a whole different thing going on. So the whole velocity thing. I mean, it's just there's a lot of physics, a lot more physics involved in that, obviously. But yeah, you're right. Statistically, it's so much better than driving or riding a motorcycle or anything else on the ground. So
It's probably
actually kind
safer
of
than
funny.
eating McDonald's, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely.
It probably
man.
is.
I mean,
You think
it's
about how many
super safe.
flights happen every day, and how many people fly.
Thousands and thousands
Yeah.
of flights every single day that get safe to their destinations. And like I said, in the U.S., you can look it up. I don't have the data on that off the top of my head, but it's been years since we've had anything happen to a U.S. carrier. Here in the United States. Internationally, it's a different story, but yeah. So
Did you ever play Pilot Wings?
Pilot Wings was that on?
That's SNES and
what was that on?
64.
Yeah,
I think there's one on
did.
GameCube,
Uh-huh.
but I didn't.
Yeah. Yeah, PlayStation. I was going to mention these. PlayStation 1, Ace Combat. I
Ooh.
started on that series.
That whole
They're
series
still
is
coming
really
out.
well known.
They just came out with the Ace Combat 7. And I had friends that were playing that. And,
So
and
you
really
were
enjoying
playing.
it,
You were
so.
even into this stuff before The Sims.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, I was playing Ace Combat. I'm trying to think what other like kind of flight sims, like Star Fox. That was a cool one.
Yeah. Star Fox was pretty cool.
But was Star Fox on Super Nintendo though?
There was one
No, that was
Super and 64, and I believe there's
That's what it was.
Yeah, the Super was one of the very first games, or if not the only game, that was commercially released. The cartridge actually had, I think they called it the Z chip, because Star Fox had some really rudimentary like 3D graphics.
Okay.
And the reason that the SNES couldn't pull it off by itself, but the way they pulled it off is they actually put a chip in the cartridge that did a lot of the processing and then sent that information to the SNES. And that was a big deal. Like when Star Fox came out, I believe PS1 might have come out. It was at the tail end of the SNES life cycle. But it was one of the first times like you had real 3D graphics in a household console.
For some weird reason, I never owned Star Fox, but I had played it, at friends' houses, and I really enjoyed it, and it was really cool. But I can't remember. I don't know why I didn't own it. There's really no reason why I didn't. Maybe as I had already invested. Maybe I had already gotten a PlayStation 1. I just don't remember exactly why. But yeah, I'd never gotten it, and I never had a 64, so I just had
That's
right when
interesting.
I went from SNES and some games on there like Ken Griffey Jr. baseball.
Nice.
Madden 98, all the sports games that you play, and FIFAs and hockey, NHL hockey. All those EA sports games were fantastic. So Street Fighter 2, huge one throughout the years. I think back to all these games, and like what it's making me think of is like I hear a lot of my friends that are in the tech industry they're like, yeah, I started training for my job at 12 years old, like is when you started touching computers and playing with computers and all that kind of stuff. But same thing for me, man. Like, honestly, like a lot of the stuff involved, and the only term that's coming to my mind now is like kind of the hand-eye coordination and all that. But really, like playing all those games really got me ready for going to pilot training. Being able to multitask and do all the deal with all these different things, and handle different situations and make decision making and all that kind of stuff. It's you really start those things at a lot younger age than you realize. So
Yeah, you definitely flex those muscles. I think one of the things obviously video gaming can be addictive. We probably all know someone,
sure,
especially that's got way into a cell phone game and spent a bunch of money or played an MMO. But the flip side is you're also, I think subconsciously you're working a lot of these cognitive muscles because every game is built around a rule set. And in order to play the game and play successfully, you have to first learn, okay, what are the rules of this game? Maybe you're familiar because it's a side scroll. It's like Mario, so I know it's probably going to be some jumping. But, this one's different. There's a rope or there's a raccoon suit. What does that do? Oh, it makes it fly. Oh, that kind of changes up. Well, can I fly here? Can I fly there? What? And you start, like, figuring out what the rules are and then what the problems are and what you can and can't get away with. And that's like problem solving 101, and I think it happens so naturally with video games. Sometimes I wonder, like, the older generation, anytime I try to bring someone in that's maybe not been a gamer or not been computer literate, even if they're my age and they didn't play games, and they want to learn how to do marketing online. And I try to teach them or start teaching them, and you realize, like, I think it's simple. And it is simple conceptually in a lot of ways. Get qualified traffic to a website that can convince people to do something. That's what marketing is. But to actually do that, I don't know. I don't know if you have this happen when you try to teach people flying. You have the curse of knowledge, and you don't realize how much you know until you try to tell someone who doesn't know anything, and then you're like, oh my goodness, like, this is impossible. Like, we're never going to get there. But I've noticed that people with computer skills and video game skills, even if they have no familiarity with marketing, they are familiar with learning systems.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that's all this is you're just learning a system. Well, I've learned a bunch of different. I know how to learn. I've learned how to learn, specifically like closed systems.
Yeah, a lot of video game people that I know that are into video games are very quick learners, and they can pick things up very quickly. And you notice that amongst pilots too. You just notice this. Some pilots that pick it up a lot quicker than others and pick up different concepts quicker than others. And I attribute that a lot to video games. And I see what's crazy is now seeing my kids. Being able to raise my kids on this stuff. And we have this whole, our own problems as parents now and knowing how to properly raise them because we don't know what this stuff does to them, right? I mean, we know that, okay, like I went outside as a kid just as much as I stayed at home playing video games, right?
Sort of in general,
outside yeah, I would play for a few hours on Super Nintendo, and then I go skate, just as much. And like these days, it's just different, you don't do that. But I'm a big believer in Minecraft, for my kids. Like my youngest, my 4-year-old, I see him, he gets on there, and I mean, he's doing things like he's 4, dude, and he can get in there and he sits there and he will have a piece of paper because we let all the kids trade off, right? Every 20 minutes, the kids will trade off for their turn on Minecraft, and they'll help each other, and they have a little book that gives them instructions sometimes. But my son, when it's not his turn, he has a piece of paper out and he's planning out what he's going to build. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like that is so awesome. Like,
That's
he's got a little engineer mind. Yeah. My family's not engineer minded, but my wife's family definitely is. My wife's dad, my father-in-law was a Boeing engineer, built satellites and worked on airplanes and all that kind of stuff. And brother works at JPL, other brothers in physics and all, so he's definitely got that going for him. And while I don't necessarily think like that, I'm kind of more on the like open creative side. That's how I learn best, and kind of how I operate. I just want to foster that within him and kind of notice what his, not just him, but my 2 daughters as well. Notice what their strengths are and just foster those and get them.
Use the technology to get more bang for your buck, but also at the same time mitigate any sort of side effects. That's a hard task.
Yeah, it's really, really hard to know how to do it, but also to do it in a healthy way. I don't know what the right answer is. We're trying,
Ugh.
we're doing our best because there's not a ton of resources out there to
Social
to know.
media gives me the heebie-jeebies
Yeah,
when I think about my daughters. It's like, oh, gee, what? Like, how am I gonna? I'm just like, okay, you're 4. I don't have to worry about it, but I know that this day is coming, and I know that I'm also think that society in general and culture, like all this technology, you could say we're in the adolescent phase or maybe early childhood phase. And right, this social media thing happened. There's a lot of good things happening because of social media. There's a lot of bad things happening, and if what I comfort myself with is like, oh, just like everything, we'll adapt, we'll figure out, and then the culture, the people will kind of figure out the way to navigate this. But those people in the transition, there's gonna be some bad luck. There's already been sacrifices, right? We have a suicide problem with girls in social media, and there's some links there. And that's kind of like during that transition, there's going to be some casualties. And
yeah.
I think if you're a parent right now, everything's in transition and transitioning quicker, and you just have to understand that. Yeah, I don't know. It freaks me out. Social media in particular, I have no clarity on how I'm going to navigate that.
Yeah, the hope for me is that, science will have like figured this out better as far as what social media is doing to us as a society.
Yeah,
I'm hoping that like in 10 years when my kids are to that point that, I mean, it's going to be sooner than 10 years. So yeah, that's scary. But, hoping that we understand it just a little bit better so that we can better educate our children on how to navigate that, so. But we have to stay up on that, and we have to stay up on the tech ourselves. And we have to, luckily I enjoy it. And luckily,
yeah.
that's kind of what I do in my free time is, if I have free time in the house, I'm going to go play a game on the computer. I'm going to go fly a flight sim, or I'm going to go mess around, tweak my computer. I just, that's what I enjoy doing on my free time. So luckily I'm there. I am reading the studies that are coming out, listening to a lot of the podcasts that are coming out. As a pilot, that's what I kind of enjoy too. Is I get a lot of free time in airports, and
I was going to say you
all
probably
that kind
get
of
a lot
stuff.
of podcast time flying.
Even just sitting in the back of airplanes too. I sit in the back of airplanes a lot, so I get a lot of time to listen to podcasts and indulge in all that stuff. So,
What podcast are you into right now?
I mean, I always gravitate towards the Joe Rogan podcast.
Everyone does, though. That's part of being
Right.
That's part of just being it feels so synonymous with almost it's rare when I meet someone who doesn't at least like it a little bit.
Yeah. Well, it's the Oprah for men, right?
It is the Oprah for men. And like,
But like, well, you had said something to me a while back when we had a little heart-to-heart conversation, and you're like, you were saying that it was like listening to that podcast was kind of like the father figure for you, and that really resonated with me because I'm like, oh yeah, absolutely, man. Like that was, without idolizing him, because I don't feel like I idolize the guy. Like he's definitely. It's just the way that he approaches things that I really appreciate, and the people that he has on, and just how he approaches problems and situations. And
he feels like a regular person that's
totally
making it through life pretty good, and that's nice to see that and be exposed to that, because you also get exposed to a lot of people that are it's a dumpster fire with a lot of people, and it can make you feel like that's inevitable because life can get stressful, and you feel maybe you're starting to fall apart, or you're getting stretched at the seams. And it's, well, hey, there are regular people like me out there. He's a dad, he's got kids. I remember the first time I listened to him, I had listened to a couple other podcasts, but I didn't really know what it was. And whatever it was, he brought on, I picked something with a scientist, because I found like some title. I'm like, oh, maybe I think it was probably Neil deGrasse Tyson, one of the old Neil deGrasse Tyson ones. And I just remember thinking, oh, he's asking the same questions I would ask. Like, and he's getting he's just as dumb as me. He's getting confused at the same time I'm getting confused, and then he's asking him at the same time I'm confused and asking him a similar question I would ask. So I'm kind of getting a chance to hang out with Neil deGrasse Tyson
yeah, exactly.
via this guy. And so that was really what got me into it. He was like a portal to people that I would never get to hang out with otherwise.
Yeah, he's not trying to be anyone else. He's just being himself and trying to understand the world as just a regular person. It
has turned into this crazy phenomena, though. At this point,
crazy, man. Yeah.
His podcast is massive.
Yeah, that's what's so weird. Yeah, I just listened today. I listened to the Bernie Sanders one. And it's like, what?
I did too.
So crazy. Yeah.
What'd you
Super
think?
good.
I don't know anything
Great.
about him other than that podcast.
I somewhat followed him on the last round, and I enjoy what he says without getting too deep into politics here, because I'm probably as neutral and as open as it gets, as anyone would get. And what's crazy is I actually that's always been kind of my value growing up, was that I feel like I was always I always had balanced views, right? I could always see one
Both
side of
sides.
things.
Yeah.
I could see both sides, man, and I just can't come to a decision. It's hard for me to come to a decision, but I enjoy the process of trying to figure out both sides and trying to understand people, right? Trying to see where they're coming from, have that sort of empathy for people, right? And be like, okay, why do they think this way? Maybe I don't initially feel this way, but why would they feel this way? And trying to understand that. But anyways, yeah. So
I liked
that
it just
aside,
for the sheer fact of I can actually listen to the dude talk, because when it comes
yeah,
to politics, I don't really know anything, and then I just get exposed to what I know is media stuff and sound bites, and I know that that's not a credible representation of what any one candidate is, right? Because I'm not
yeah,
super into politics, but I do get exposed to political stuff, but I know I have such a surface level exposure that I can't really rely on any of the data that I get coming in. But every once in a
yeah,
while, I'll listen to a podcast. I'm like, all right, well, I know I've heard a bunch of stuff about this Bernie Sanders guy. Apparently, he's a socialist and he's going to turn us into Venezuela and he's
yeah,
terrible, blah, 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 or the flip side. But I actually just get to listen to the dude talk for an hour and a half and
yep,
see if what makes sense. What I really liked, and I don't know anything about economics, but people will say, how is Bernie Sanders going to pay for everything? And he's like, well, why don't we just tax speculation on Wall Street? Tax
yeah,
Wall Street gambling. I'm like, oh, yeah. And that wouldn't ruin Wall Street. It's like gambling tax didn't ruin casinos. Casinos still make an ass ton of money, right?
totally.
They
Oh
still,
yeah,
and they still essentially are predatory business on weak people. That's where the
yep,
majority of the money. But you can't outlaw that, because anytime you outlaw anything, this big rabbit hole doesn't work. But you can at least, they're in a way, gambling doesn't provide a ton of value to society as a whole. It actually maybe sucks a little bit of value out of society because it preys on people's addictions.
yeah, mm-hmm.
But at least you can recoup some of that value by taxing it and then putting that money back into the infrastructure and back into the country. And we're not getting any of that money from Wall Street, apparently. I don't know. Maybe he's full of shit and he's lying. But the way he presented it was, hey, we're not taxing Wall Street speculation, which is essentially gambling. They're making a lot of money. With a small tax, we can make a ton of money. That would free us up to be able to do some of the things that I'm talking about. As opposed to what I was exposed to by regular surface level media, is he's just going to raise all our taxes and take all our money. And that's not what he said so far. I haven't finished the podcast. That's not what he said.
Yeah. Well, I finished it, and I think probably the thing that hit home for me most is hearing someone who could potentially be, the leader of the free world say, "I don't know what the right answer is to this issue." Right? They were talking about gun
That's
control or
refreshing.
something like that.
Yeah.
He's like, "I have an idea." He's like, I have an idea. This is kind of the idea of what I think how it should start. But I really just don't know. This is a really, really complex issue. It's not something we can solve in a 12-second soundbite. It's not something that we should solve in a 12-second soundbite. This is a very, very complex issue. And I love hearing that from someone who's running for president, because you're not hearing that from a lot of the other candidates. You're not hearing that in the media. That's why, I don't turn the TV on anymore. But if I do, I see it in a hotel or, in a hotel,
Yeah.
lobby or whatever. It's like, dude, it's just ridiculous that's what's controlling us right now, and that's where people's perceptions are being molded and changed right now. It's scary to me, and luckily I had this professor in my freshman year in college who that was her basic, her whole purpose in freshman English in college was to show us how deceptive the media was. And I'm so glad I had that class, because she was just like, yeah, this is how deceptive media is. And so from that point on, I could look at a news title and be like, oh, how did they word this? And they know exactly how that title is going to make me feel. Right. And so anyways, that's what politics is. It's all this game. It's
That's
all
what online marketing is too. The same thing plays
yeah.
out.
Oh, you're
Yeah.
totally,
I mean, I know
get
that same level of stuff's happening. I know that obviously with news and journalism, clicks and drives money, and now with the new internet model, it's some of it's just like the internet model is sort of rewarding sensationalism because that's what's profitable.
Yeah.
And that's what's going to drive, and people are going to push that way. Sam Harris had a great podcast, a couple
Yeah,
podcasts.
I listen to him a lot too. Yeah.
With, I think he was a Google exec, and maybe Google and Facebook. But his concept he was talking about was all these platforms right now, for the most part, are optimizing for time spent on site. And not necessarily good time, just like whatever's going to keep you engaged and keep you on the site and keep you... So, since arguments, sensationalism, outrage...
Yep.
Hardcore right memes, hardcore left memes, ridiculous things, and it's just like they want more time on site, and that it's partially done on purpose, and it's partially the algorithm is like, well, that's what I'm tooled to optimize for, so we can serve more ads, and then we also want things that have more clicks, and then some of it's conscious, some of it's, and it all comes together, and it's getting really crazy. And I do like that about Bernie Sanders, because he also said along that same time, he said, not only do I not have an answer, but I don't think we should not try something. We have to try our best.
Exactly. You have to try.
We have to try something.
Absolutely.
We can't keep not doing something, because not doing something, we know it's going to happen. The same thing that's been happening.
Yeah, and he's just so down to earth. I think that's what's going to be very appealing about him, because there's so many politicians that it's really hard to connect with.
All my right-leaning friends are freaking their shit out right now. You socialist asshole! You know what, guys? I don't care. I'm like an hour into it. He hasn't said anything crazy. Maybe he said crazy things somewhere else. I haven't watched all this, but for the hour that I listened to him, he seems pretty rational. Spoiler
alert, he's not going to. He's really not going to say anything crazy. It's like, and I have a good friend who... I have a good friend who works at a very high level for a really famous political pundit, right? Very, very high level. And I'm like, dude, I know him really well, right? My friend used to intern with the ACLU, okay? Like super left wing. And that's how we were in college. And then now this guy's relatively right wing, right? The guy that he works for, and I'm like, hey, how do you do that, man? I just don't understand how you could go and like work for this guy, like. And he's like, well, it's like it's a little different when you're at this level. Like it's not as partisan as you think it is at this level. Where a lot of those people, like let's say like all the people at Fox News and all the people at, let's say, whatever
I don't know,
a
Fox,
left wing is,
CNN,
like CNBC or whatever,
CNBC,
like. It's not as partisan as you think. They're actually kind of all friends with each other. They all know each other. It's not as like crazy as they make it look like on TV. Yeah, they're playing their roles, and it's all sensationalism. It's about entertainment, and that really kind of bummed me out, because I'm like, you know what, man, this is like, man, where are we going with this? Because it's kind of what you were talking about. Like they just care about getting the views and getting the advertising.
It's
all that kind of stuff.
It's not news. It's entertainment.
Yeah. Which is hilarious because
it's optimized to be entertainment.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to get into this topic with you, but I have a good friend who was a pilot for all the Fox News guys, right? And all the really, really high up Fox News guys, I guess, and they're actually all like left wing people.
But they're playing their role.
Well, and it's all about money, That's how I see it, I guess. But anyways, I'm not an expert in this area. This is just how I see it.
Well, I have one idea. And then we can get back to some Super Nintendo and PS1.
Sure.
So Bernie brought up what everyone sort of knows is a problem. I don't think anyone left or right would disagree that we know that there's some fuckery going on with lobbying and money, and that sort of muddies the water to some extent. Whether you think big money is controlling everything to a high degree, or big money is just sort of influencing things, there is some scale of big money getting in the way of, and people making decisions for those people, and the common person has no way to really influence policy making, because we can't lobby, we don't have money. And the other issue is that big money is not paying taxes. Like he mentioned that I did Google this. Amazon didn't pay income tax, at least for 1 year.
Yeah,
an article.
Crazy, huh?
Okay, how's that possible? They move money, they reinvest it, they write things off, they whatever, blah 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 blah. And Rogan asked, like, well, how can that be legal? It's like, well, they're the ones that make the laws. So they just wrote
they
into
have all the
law
power.
the way something like that. Okay, that makes total sense. So we're not getting any tax. Like our country is producing a lot of revenue, but we're not we're not skimming that revenue for the government effectively. And instead, the IRS is coming after dudes that are like wrote too much from their construction business for pennies.
Yeah.
When Jeff Bezos could be, even if he paid 1%, some ridiculously small number that wouldn't affect him, and he still have billions. So this is my idea. This is my idea. This may be stupid, and people are probably going to be like, "You idiot," but that's fine. At least I'm willing to like. It's
At least we're
scary.
talking about this stuff,
It's
yeah.
scary to talk about politics because
Oh,
you're
yeah,
going to
man.
get roasted by somebody.
Oh, yeah,
Hardcore.
exactly.
All
Someone's
right,
gonna
I'm
know
a
something more
dummy,
than
so
you.
I just admit right now it could be a dumb idea. But income tax, people have problems with income taxes and all this. What if? And people talk about flat taxes. Like, what if they just did 10%? No. What if you did no taxes? No taxes. Nobody pays taxes. You don't pay sales tax, but you take 1/100th of a cent from every transaction
Yeah.
that takes place. So if you're Jeff Bezos and you want to move all your billions to Cayman Islands, you know what? Good job. You know what? It's a free country. Thanks for making this big company. Thanks for making millions of jobs. We're going to let you hoard all your money and not pay taxes on it. But when you transfer that money, we're just going to take like a tiny percentage.
Yeah.
Tiny. Like no one would even notice. It would be
Yeah.
like 1/100th of a cent, 1,000th of a cent when you buy something. Anyone that makes money facilitating the transfer of money, whether you're a credit card processor, banks, we just tax that industry. And every because that's how they make money, right? That's how your they charge a little bit of money for every transaction.
Yeah.
It's already built into the system. So you're just going to charge an extra.
People wouldn't notice it very much. That's what's nice about it.
I bet this is just me, but there's billions and billions and billions of money transactions that happen every day. There's 350 million people in this country. Even if you took something as small as 1/1000th of a percent, I bet that would generate that's things I would not even notice. I buy my hot dog instead of $7.25, it's $7.25.2 or something.
Yeah.
Or maybe just maybe 1 cent. What if we just made it simple? 1 cent from every transaction. That would pay for everything.
Yeah, I mean these are
Wouldn't
probably these are ideas that get thrown around. I mean they're very practical solutions, and they've thought about them. And there's so many of these ideas I'm sure that would make so much sense, but we don't have anyone in there right now who would go and do that because I don't know.
It seems like it would solve.
I don't know why.
It seems like it would solve all the people that hate taxes, want capitalism, freedom, libertarian. You know what? Taxation is theft. Fine. I ain't gonna tax you anything. You get to keep all your money. No, we're not even gonna play with write-offs and hiding money. We're just gonna take 1 cent from every transaction, and then that's gonna make it so we can pay for education, and it's gonna make it for police and whatever we want to do. I bet because it's the same idea as taxing what Bernie said, speculation on Wall Street. You're just taking a little bit from this thing that's just pushing money back and forth.
Yeah, and
all the time.
It would be nice. I'm not saying that I don't know about vote for him or whatever, but like to have a guy like that who's just down to earth and has practical solutions like that up in the pipeline, and the fact that he's even kind of like that you notice that he's trying to figure it out too, that he's not just out for himself, and he's not just out for his buddies. He's out for
he did come across that I'm actually trying to solve problems.
Yeah.
Whereas other politicians, Rogan had Tulsi Gabbard on.
Yeah, she was really, really good, and Yang was really good too. Did you listen to Yang?
Yeah, I listened to all three of them. I think I like Tulsi the most so far. I haven't finished Bernie's. My back?
I got your back,
check. Out of all three of them, I haven't finished Bernie, but I think Tulsi's my favorite. I'd have to go back and re-listen to it to compare it. But the vibe I got from her was just like, I don't know enough about all these issues to know whether her solutions are viable solutions or not. I'm not educated enough. But my gut told me that she's coming into the presidency with good faith. She's actually trying, her number one priority is to try to figure out how to make things better, whatever's possible.
Yeah.
I liked it.
Yeah, getting into the weeds with all this stuff, it's easy to get into the weeds with political conversations, but I think what would be important right now is, electing the person with the right attitude towards these things. Because a lot of times, I think that attitude is going to affect the entire country, right? I mean, it's going to hopefully kind of like, I don't know, they disseminate their, I don't know what's the right way to put this, but I don't know. I would hope that like their reasoning and their way of looking at things would rub off on the rest of the country. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Like if like Gabbard, very reasonable person. You know, I feel like even Bernie Sanders, very reasonable, down to earth person. I hope that that would just rub off on the rest of the country. You know, and it would I don't know, just that things
Well,
would kind
people
of
would
calm
say
down a little bit.
Bernie doesn't know anything about economics. It's all founded on bullshit. Blah 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 blah. That's what I thought, and then all I heard him say was, "Let's tax some speculation on gambling."
Yeah.
I'm like, "Oh, that's not at all what people told me he was about."
I mean, you don't think he has like really intelligent and renowned economists working for him to figure these things out? It's not just him coming up with these ideas on his own. You know, he has a team of
fair
people,
point.
and that's usually what these people are. They have a team of people that come up with solutions for these things, you know, and have ideas, and think tanks and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot more behind the scenes, and I think that's what always makes it hard for me when having these conversations. Is I always know that there's so much more behind the story that you're hearing. Like whatever you are seeing is something that's been spun and watered down or whatever. There's so much that's going behind that. You know, why whenever I see something come out, I'm like, why are they telling me this? Like, why is this being spun this way? Or I don't know. It's just it's hard to believe anything.
I think I know how
Really
we fix it. I think have you ever played Civilization?
Yeah, oh yeah, I got it. So I have it on the iPad. I
Yeah.
play it on the plane all the
I
time
think we just
when I'm
take
in the back.
the top 100 Civilization players in the world, and we put them in a room and say, start figuring shit out, and come to us with some ideas. You guys are now the Jedi Council of 100, and
well, those basics,
we're gonna turn this baby around.
I'm sure those basics of like turn-based play, you know, and like how like the it's kind of like I feel like it's a more complex type of chess, you know. When
I
you play
bet you could, along this simulation thing. What if someone built like the Arma of running America? Like they tried to simulate running a country to the most granular level possible. I bet you could actually get some value out of that. Like looking at like what happens when I'm sure they have simulators for economics.
I think they do, right? Yeah, they have like models. Like
I imagine
they have like
would. Yeah.
Yeah, you like punch in information, and then I don't even know how that kind of stuff works. It's definitely beyond me, but they're essentially simulators, right, to see how things would play out with certain scenarios.
Yeah, I guarantee there's just as deep of a community of economic simulator nerds as there are flight sim nerds, and we need
absolutely.
We need those people. Like if I was president, if I could just be president, I wouldn't try to figure anything out. I would just build a team to figure out who is the smartest people in every area in our country.
Yep.
And I'm just whatever it takes. Let's put them together. Let's do that.
Yeah, well, come work for me. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think that's what some of these people do. I think some of them also put their buddies and
there might
people
be some
who've
buddies.
done that.
Yeah.
Maybe a lot of favors. Yeah, that's what politics is. I mean, the politics in of itself is just favors that you've done for each other. Stuff like that. So, anyways.
Did you play any RTS games like StarCraft, Age of Empires?
Played StarCraft a tiny bit, not too much. I wasn't too much into that kind of stuff. I never got into Warcraft. My brother played a lot of Diablo type stuff growing up. I don't know if that's in the same genre, but not too much. I think, no. Civilization is about as far as I got, I think, into that. So I still really enjoy that.
I could see you playing Civilization. That's why I asked. I was like, if you're playing all these other games, I bet you probably got into Civ. Is definitely it's like a smart kid game.
Yeah, but I'm like I said, I'm not into those turn-based games necessarily. Like, but for some reason that game
got you,
and the app and this the way that they approach that the strategy kind of thing it was really cool to me. So
have you ever heard of a series called like Europe? It's like Civilization.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I'm actually pulling up my Steam right now to see
it's
what
like
I've got.
Europe Civilization, and they go. I have a friend that's like says he knows so much history from this Europa series,
Interesting. Yeah.
because they base it on all real history, and it's like Civilization, but you play as different countries in different time periods. And I wonder if the
Yeah.
military has like a really badass version of Command and Conquer, where you have to manage troops
Yeah.
and like actually manage running a campaign in
Yeah.
Afghanistan or something. I bet they
I'm
do.
sure that I'm
I
sure
bet
they
they
use
do.
those things to teach people. They
Yeah.
use these simulations to teach people how these things work and how things would play out in a certain situation. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. Yeah, my thing with games now, especially as I'm older, it's got to be something that I can jump in and play kind of quickly, which is not what Arma or Flight Simulation is. So don't like
Exactly. Wait,
I'm
wait a
kind of
minute, because all you've
I'm
talked
contradicting
about,
myself. But my
yeah.
other types of games that I play are like first-person shooter type stuff. Like I play Insurgency Sandstorm a lot right now. It's
Okay.
just something I can jump in. You can work together with other people really quickly. You just get thrown into a game with a bunch of other people, and you go through and you work through a co-op and work through these different objectives together, and which is super fun. I guess I'm really attracted to open-ended sandbox style games, though, like Minecraft, like just how it's all
Yeah.
open and we can create our own community and we can build our own thing, and that's what Arma was for me. That's somewhat what the simulator is for me, Flight Sim is for me, because like it is what you
Make it.
put into it.
Yeah, it's
It's
what you
what you
put
put
into it.
into it. And same with Minecraft. Like it's what you build is what you kind of end up getting from it, and it never ends. But one cool one. I don't know if you've ever heard of DayZ. Have you heard of that?
Yeah, isn't DayZ a mod, like an Arma mod?
It was an Arma mod, but they brought it to a standalone. This guy Dean Hall brought it to a standalone, and it's had its hiccups. It's definitely been struggling to get up and running. But the concept of it is really cool because like you can get out and you run around in this open. It's not even open world. It's just a really big world, and it's kind of this like apocalyptic zombie world. And the point isn't necessarily zombies. Like it's definitely one aspect of like the game, right? It's definitely one aspect of like trying to survive and all that. But it's actually when you encounter other people. It's like a social experiment.
Hmm.
This is what's really cool about it. Like you don't know. Let's say like you're playing and you're on the other side of the map, and I haven't seen anyone for 20 minutes while I'm running around in this map and I'm looting things. I'm trying to build up gear. And let's say like I have a handgun with 2 bullets, right? So I've got to like use those 2 bullets. Like this is very realistic scenario in DayZ, right? And then I'm like, I see you over by the train tracks, and I'm like, okay, what do I do? Do I hide, right, and just wait till you pass, or do I try to approach you and try to befriend you? I have no idea how you're going to react to
Or do I
me,
just proactively
right?
kill you, not take any risks?
Yeah, and the other question, yeah, exactly. And the other question is, do I have my gun out and approach you with a gun, or do I approach you without a gun and I can put my hands up and just say, hey, are you friendly? But also be ready to defend myself if need be. It's very, I don't know, it's just a really cool social experiment. And there's this guy Jam Jar, he's called the Jam Jar on YouTube, and he's this UK guy with a cool accent, and he gets on there and it's really awesome kind of social experience that he does. And he has really funny videos of like how he's like come up to people and he'll mess with them and kind of joke around with them. But yeah, you got to come up with whatever your style of gameplay is. And I love that kind of open-ended social thing. And this is where games come into play for me as of late. Yeah, I remember as a kid, like I really wished the multiplayer stuff worked. Like Falcon 4.0, I remember, yeah, okay, I can get in there, I can fly with other people, but for whatever reason, it was just so wonky at the time. Like it was really hard to get into a server. Like you had to know someone else who even had the game, get on
Yeah.
it, coordinate it on a landline with like trying to talk to them and try to get them. It was really difficult at the time. And I had all these like dreams and kind of thoughts of like, man, it'd be cool to get like, you know, like into a big, like I had these thoughts of like being in a World War II game, and like I'd seen this World War II game that advertised itself as like a multiplayer, and you had 50 players in there. This is early on, like, and I was like, that's crazy. That'd be so cool. I wish I could do that. But like, I think I ended up getting it, but like the multiplayer aspect and trying to get connected was so difficult at the time. And now we have that, and now it's so easy to do that kind of stuff. But I'm really attracted towards games that are like multiplayer, where you play with other people
So
and
what you're
bring you together
telling
with your
me,
friends and all that.
you're telling me you're big into Fortnite. I knew it.
Well, PUBG PUBG's a
PUBG.
cool.
That's the
I
cool
think PUBG's a
Fortnite.
cool one. Yeah, yeah,
You get a pass. You get a pass.
yeah.
Just kidding. I mean,
Definitely not.
obviously Fortnite's dope. A lot of people like it. It's just not
Yeah,
my cup of tea. But I did try
same.
PUBG. Isn't PUBG an Arma mod originally? I think as well.
Yeah,
And,
yeah. I think it came
yeah,
from the same engine and everything. Yeah,
because
yeah.
I got
I that's a fun one to be able to jump in with your friends, and
yep.
we actually I got my it's so actually kind of hilarious because I played on mobile, and it's like one of the best games I feel like on mobile next to Civilization. That and Minecraft, and yeah, there's like those three games: Civilization, Minecraft, and PUBG. But I got my in-laws into it, like my sister-in-law, my brother-in-law, and all this. Like we were just sitting like at the cabin, just playing that together. It's like, and these are like in-laws that like aren't the gamer types, but I really got them into it, and they're really stoked
But
on
they can get
PUBG.
into
So
PUBG on mobile. That's interesting. Because
yeah,
anytime
yeah.
I've tried to play, I don't play anything on my phone.
I usually don't either, but yeah,
Because nothing. It's either these like sort of like RTS light games that have this mechanic that makes you wait,
yep.
and
I'm all with you.
then they want to make
Yeah,
you pay if you don't want to wait, or
yeah.
any 3D games. When I try to play them, like I bought some FPSs back when I had like an older iPhone. I got Infinity Blade, which was this like mobile game that had great graphics at the time, but the controls were always just terrible. And so you're like the fifth person though that's told me PUBG is awesome on the phone,
It's
and I
amazing.
can't wrap my head around how could you control that game on the phone.
Well, that's actually what, yeah, it takes a little bit of time to figure it out how to navigate it with your thumbs. And then you realize like they've overcome, like there's some little solutions that they have in there, like a left thumb button to shoot instead of the right. Cause they know that, if you're stationary trying to move and focus, trying to aim your gun with your right thumb, you've got to have your left thumb to be able to shoot too. So it has a button on the left, with the left thumb to be able to shoot, for example. But if you're running with your left thumb, then you got to be able to, and you're trying to run and shoot, then you've got to be able to shoot with your right thumb too. So they have two buttons to shoot. So stuff like that. I'm looking right now to see what, those are the top three that I have in my phone are Civ, the new Civ. It is not, it's the same game as the one on PC. Like it's not
That makes
held
sense
back.
to me.
All the features and everything.
That game you
right?
just click.
When it first came out, it was $60 on the phone.
On the
like
phone.
It was on the iPad. Yeah, iPad and phone. Like, I think it's $20 now, and then they have a bunch of like add-ons and mods for it, or like packs that you can add on to it. I haven't gotten into any of the packs or anything, but and then Minecraft, obviously. I mean, that's just like a no-brainer. Like to me, like to be able to get in there, and the multiplayer is working so well on that. Like I have a computer right here below me that's just another older like quad core thing going on, and I have a persistent server running for Minecraft for my kids and my brother-in-laws who get on with my kids. And so sometimes everyone, like there's been days where I'm on the road a lot, right? So I can actually get on with my daughter while I'm on the road at a hotel, let's say, and I can go play Minecraft
That's
with my
pretty
kids.
dope.
Can do cool stuff like that.
How old is your daughter?
I haven't been doing it lately, but what's that?
How old is your daughters? The two older ones.
9, 6, and so 9, 6, and then my son's 4.
My oldest is turning 4, but you said your 4-year-old can kind of play Minecraft in sort of.
Oh, he's not only kind of like in the last 4 to 5 months, we've kind of just like let him roam free on it. Not time wise, but just let him learn it. And at first, he couldn't do anything, and my brother-in-law would be playing with him. He's even noticed a huge increase. And my brother-in-law kind of teach him remotely through Google Hangouts, and he's just noticed like how quickly he can just go in and just build stuff. And so my kids have actually surpassed me in what they know about Minecraft now, because they used to come to me with, "Hey Dad, how do I do this? Hey, what do I click with this? How do I do this?" Now my son, he can hardly spell, right? But he can play Minecraft. And so when he goes into inventory and he searches for something to build, he has to ask me how to spell it. What does he say? The one yesterday in the car, he has it on the tablet. So we were letting him play in the car on the way home from Idaho. And he's like, how do I spell flint and steel? I'm like, flint and steel? Like, how do you know what the heck that even is? Like, it's just hilarious.
But how does he know what they're called if he can't read?
Because his sisters.
Oh, so he hears people call it, and yeah.
He knows how to build all the stuff. He knows how to, start fires. He knows what those resources do, what those materials do. But anyways, yeah, Minecraft, I feel like super powerful. Yeah, PUBG. That's just a really good game. Um, I have a one called Stardew Valley that I hear a lot of good stuff about, but I have it
Yes.
on my phone and I bought it, but I just haven't really gotten into it.
That
And that's
game
the
is
same.
sort of like an indie. It's one of the indie hits that
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think they made some good money. It's from what I understand, like Animal Crossing, kind of like you
yeah.
just farm and I've watched some gameplay videos of it. I can see the appeal to it,
Sure.
especially on the phone. I think the phone or the Switch would be the perfect platform for a game like that. What if you think back to? I want to ask on PS1. Besides Ace Combat,
Ooh.
did you get into game like? Obviously, you were kind of into games but you were a very different gamer than most quote unquote gamers that I've had
Yeah.
on, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm interested on these systems, like what stuff may have you played? Because you're not mentioned. Most people, other than Mario, you haven't mentioned anything, which is basically everybody else mentions.
Like
So
fantasy games and stuff like that. Like I
yeah,
never got into fantasy games very much. PS1, I got into like Metal Gear Solid.
yeah,
Like that was a fantastic story and gameplay. Resident Evils, some of the Resident Evils back on PlayStation. I really liked those. Like I feel like I really enjoy the games that have a realistic aspect to them, like Splinter Cell or like
mm,
and some Tom Clancy stuff like Ghost Recon. I think I even have what's the one called now? The most recent Tom Clancy one that's out. Uh, can't find it off the top
Wildlands,
of my head. Yeah, Wildlands. That kind of
Wildlands,
stuff.
yeah,
But
yeah.
then let's say back on PS1, X games like snowboarding, like that was a big one. So kind of more on the realistic side. That was like I never got into the fantasy stuff. Like I don't know why, and I'm still kind of that way even with like my movies. Like I'm even like that with a lot of other things that I do.
Do you like sci-fi movies?
Depends. It depends on what it is. Like Interstellar. Love that movie. Like stuff that's plausible. Do you know what I mean? Like something
Yeah,
that
I
I
should
feel like is
clarify.
something.
When I say sci-fi, I don't mean Star Wars. There's there's
I like
sci-fi.
Star Wars. I like Star
Yes,
Wars, but that's
that's
just
like
because I grew up
just
on it,
fun,
right?
right?
Yeah.
But there's like there's sci-fi aliens and explosions, and then there's sci-fi where you explore like weird things that may come up down the road. Like I would say, Stellar is like that. It's like, okay, well, what would happen if Earth is out of food? And
Yeah.
we have the ability to go through a black hole, and like, let's explore these ideas that are kind of based in reality. That's why I like sci-fi,
Yeah.
because it's basically fantasy, but you're building the fantasy by extrapolating on things that are kind of grounded in reality that may be possible.
Like Black Mirror, like some Black
Yeah,
Mirror stuff,
that's
right?
one of the best
Yeah,
sci-fi that exists.
yeah.
Yeah, agreed.
And I'll be honest, I've only seen a few episodes. Like I just like I said, I don't spend a ton of time like watching shows and TV and stuff like that. But those are things that have definitely appeal to me. Like I'm trying to think of what other like I've never really gotten into. I'm trying to think back to like PS1 stuff. Like it's always been something that's like either something kind of more realistically focused,
Yeah.
focused on some aspect of realism.
Have you
So,
heard of Eve Online?
I have heard of it, yeah, but I don't know much
It's
of what it
sci-fi,
is.
but
So.
it's basically it's a sci-fi game, but it's a economy simulator masquerading as a sci-fi game,
Oh, interesting.
which is
Okay.
like you manage. It's completely open. There is no single player. It's completely open-ended, user-generated. It's been around for like 15 years. They have Eve
Yeah, I've heard of
conferences.
it for sure.
And
Okay.
they have like full, like you can be a trader, you can be a pirate, you can be a miner, and everything is
Yeah.
built by players. They have huge federations, backstabbing, massive, like it's an economy simulator, and that seems like something.
Interesting.
I know it's
Yeah,
sci-fi, on like the
it's
paint
on.
job is sci-fi, but
And something kind of more that's based on this kind of stuff. I'd have to have someone kind of walk me through it
yeah,
because there's a lot of time invested in these things. That like, a parent of three, like I was saying with a career, like it doesn't necessarily have. But there's other things that I'm willing to kind of invest my time into. But if I were to get into something like that, I'd need someone to walk me through it to kind of overcome the initial learning curve quicker. Um, but yeah, I've got like what do I have installed right now? There's this game called Squad. It's a first person
Squad?
shooter, but you've got to work together. It's all about working together. Like, you know, when you jump in Battlefield or Call of Duty, right? You can get
Yeah.
by with like lone wolfing it, right? And you know, it's all about your kill to death ratio. And but Squad's not like that. You have to have a good leader. It's all about leadership. Like, and that's what Arma was too. It was like you had to. It was like you had to have good leaders to be successful in what you're doing. So learning all those leadership skills, like, and that was actually kind of what sparked a lot of interest. Like a lot of the guys that I played Arma with, well, not a lot of them, but a few of them I met in real life. Like we actually, like, you spend so much time together, and one of them lived in Phoenix at the time when I was living there. We ended up hanging out, and I just asked him, I'm like, yeah, like, have you ever? He ended up telling me that he used some of his Arma time in the leadership positions that he did in that milsim unit, and he put it on a resume, and he had some way of like what he called it,
Justifying
because
it. Yeah.
yeah, and I can't remember the terms that he used, but you know, he was just like, yeah, it was like a veterans organization, which it kind of what it was, man. Like it was like it really like appealed to
Attracted
veterans
veterans.
because it was a
Yeah.
place for them to be able to share their knowledge and to be able to talk to people about what they did and to share their skills and to, you know, talk about their experiences openly. And it was really like a very therapeutic thing for those guys. And so he, you know, he kind of he was able to turn it into one of those things. That was actually probably one of the key moments to me where I was like, oh, hey, what, you know, how could I turn something like a hobby of mine on the computer into something that I could be of use for? So anyways, kind of got off topic there,
Did
but
you ever play Rainbow Six Siege?
yeah, I have that installed
Yeah,
right now
yeah.
too.
There's
Yeah.
I have a really good friend that has similar style as far as FPSs go. He loves
Yeah.
squad leadership, and he's always talking about Rainbow Six Siege.
Yeah. And there's one coming out. Okay, there's SWAT 4, if you remember SWAT, the old SWAT series.
Yeah.
There's a new one coming out called Ready or Not. Ready or Not? Yeah, let me look it up. My buddy
Squad
just
leader.
bought into the
The beta.
yeah, he just bought into the beta. It's like 100. It's like $120 just to buy into the beta, which the game's only gonna be like 40. But if you want to play it a year early, you can do that. I think it's called Ready or Not,
It
right?
looks pretty dope. There's a gameplay demo on YouTube.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably going to be a little rough, and I may end up buying into that a little later. I've got Escape from Tarkov, if you've heard of that. It's kind of along the same lines. Yeah, Escape from Tarkov's cool because it kind of brings in the element of MMO, like getting all your gear, and you have all this gear that you kind of hoard, and then you go into these games, but it's all based on a first-person shooter type deal. So that one's pretty cool too. But that one's brutal though, man. It's like, it's really, really hard to get good at that. But there's a lot of big Escape from Tarkov streamers. So
What's it called? Escape from what?
Escape from Tarkov.
Escape from Tarkov. It sounds like a Russian.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's pretty dang cool, man. It's brutal, but it's kind of got, this is how I like I said, I'm not familiar with MMOs very much, but it's how I feel like they bridge the gap between an MMO and a first person shooter.
Okay. Oh, this is
I
cool.
could,
There's like all these mods you can do to your gun. You have like, this cool inventory looking system.
Yeah, the shooting is just really got a good feel to it. Running around in there.
So you're not really into the like Call of Duty FPS. You're into these just like with Flight. You're into like more sim heavy.
Kind of more simulator
FPS,
stuff, yeah. Like, and I will get into those games. Like, and one of the cool stories, you know, that I have is that my dad passed away 5 years ago. But before he passed away, for those previous 3, he and my uncle, right? My uncle lived in Utah, my dad lived in California. They started playing Battlefield together online every Friday night. So, you know, whenever they could do it, like, they would get online and they would play together. And there's like guys in their 50s, know, playing, right? And they started this little crew called Skull Crushers. And it's so funny because my dad is not like, you would never think of him like doing that kind of stuff. I'm like, dude, my dad's like way into Battlefield. So I'm like, this is cool though. So me and my brother, who grew up playing games, I slowly started kind of getting in, trying to meet with them on Friday night. And I mean, they were religious about every Friday night, man. They were really close growing up. So my dad would always kind of get kind of like sappy on me, and he's like, you know, I just really feel like I really need to spend time with my brother, and It's just really good for us to spend a lot of time talking and playing games. And even if we're not, you know, talking about anything important, we're playing a game together and spending time together online.
Yeah, yeah.
My cousins would get in, and then my uncle, he would have a friend from work pop in, and we became good friends with him. So we did that for a good couple of years before he passed away. And then after he passed away, my uncle, he got like they had the logo for their Skull Crushers unit, or their little clan, and
Yeah.
they got my
Got,
cousin and my uncle got the tattoos of that group that they had together for my dad. So
that's a
and it's
great
just
story.
super cool, man. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I kind of look back on that fondly too, of that time that, even though I'm on the road as a pilot, like that's when I invested in a laptop so that I could play Battlefield with my dad. That's really when I got back into playing games as an adult. For the most part, was to play with my dad. So
That's awesome.
yeah.
I have some similar experiences where I've bonded with a family member over a video game, specifically my brother, who I grew up like a bunch of divorces. So my parents were both divorced previous, had a bunch of kids, and they got married. I'm the only one from my two parents,
Hello.
technically.
I think I lost you.
Oh, check. Am I back? Check.
Got you back now.
Check. Yeah. Sometimes my
Last thing
internet-
I heard was bonded with a family member. So
It's just it's Comcast, man. Late at night, everyone's on Netflix, sucking up
Right,
my
yeah.
bandwidth, baby.
I know, dude.
Uh,
I don't know if it's me or you. It could be me too, but
I think it's me.
got a
It's been
gigabit of
happening-
fiber, but you wouldn't think it because it has a lot of hiccups. So
It's been happening to me like the last few days doing podcasts. It didn't happen before, so that's
Okay,
probably
yeah.
me. Because it's happened with other people, so
okay,
it's
gotcha.
probably me. But I was saying is all my brothers and sisters are technically half brothers and sisters. Both my parents were a big family, 7 kids, but both were previous marriages. I was the only one from my two parents. And my closest sister got married when I was like 10 or 11. And I grew up with her little, and I was really didn't, and there was some issues with like divorce and shit. I didn't really hang out with my brothers and sisters, especially my brothers who were closer in age, until after I was an adult. And it's like trying to become friends with my family as an adult much later in life was this goal. And I bonded with I had one brother who's only 3 years older than me. And he recommended this game, I don't know if you ever played Borderlands. It's a first-person shooter.
I haven't played it, but I know what it is.
Yeah. And Borderlands 2 came out, and he was talking about it. And I'm not really into first-person shooters. I hadn't played a lot. I'm like the opposite. I didn't play a lot of multiplayer. I've always, like the total opposite. Fantasy games, single-player games, ultra nerd shit. It was like everything that I was into. But he got me to play this, and for my birthday, I was newly married. My wife, I asked, okay, I just want to play this game with my brother for the whole weekend, on my birthday weekend. I had a friend lend me an Xbox 360.
Oh, sweet.
My brother bought me Xbox Gold for like 3 months, like the cheapest pass. Then I just went and bought the game. And I played through this whole game co-op with my brother. And it was probably more time than I had ever spent with my brother in my entire life up to that point.
Awesome. Yeah.
And it's like we started becoming really good friends after that. And that's what kind of reminds me of... I mean, obviously you spent time with your dad growing up. But I think because the way society's moving, like I have really close relationships with people who I've never met. But I love them. Like they're really good friends.
Yeah.
And they're online friends. And I would say like if they called me up and was like, I have an emergency, could you fly out and help me? I would do it.
Yeah.
And like you can, it's not as good as one-on-one. It's not as good as in person, but in some ways it's better because, like you said, you can't be in person with your dad all the time. You're flying. You guys' schedule's crazy, right? It's like 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. Or
Less than
like that.
It's typically 4 days at the most. So
Okay.
it's not bad. Yeah. No, but you're right. I mean, I'm smiling big there because I have groups of friends online now that like I've met in real life and we've hung out and we interact with each other every single day in like Discord or TeamSpeak or whatever we're using to communicate online, and you develop these really good relationships with people. Like for example, this kid, this guy Max, he learned to. I watched him learn to fly. I've known him for the past 5 years, and literally like he flies a jet and he's younger than me, but like I ended up. He had a problem flying out of Chicago yesterday, and we talked on the phone today, just about this issue, so we have each other's phone numbers, and they all went to this flight. So they're kind of getting mad at me because I haven't been to this Flight Sim Expo thing ever, and they've all gone for the last couple of years, and the one next year's in Vegas. But, so they've all been going with each other and, meeting each other and hanging out and stuff and having a good time. And my buddy, when he posted all the picture of all the guys, like, on Twitter, he's like, yeah, just hanging out with extended family here in Orlando, for Flight Sim Expo. And it was just like funny because the way he put it, is, it's like, yeah, man, like in a sense, like you could become really close with these people and you're like, wow, this is cool. Like it's weird because, this other kid that I was kind of mentoring with aviation and stuff like that, like his family, like took me to, when I had an overnight here in Vegas before I lived here, they took me to the water park because they were here on vacation and they're like, yeah, we'll come pick you up and we'll pay for you to go to the water park and all. I'm like, sweet. So I hung out with this guy that I kind of mentored with aviation, but he taught me a bunch of sim stuff because he knows about all that. And anyways, so, I got to talk to his parents about him starting flight training. And but the funny thing is when we were at dinner, his mom was like, oh, how'd you guys meet? And he's like, oh yeah, we met online. and you just saw her face like, what? Like she couldn't understand like she just couldn't understand that we met online.
We met online Grinder,
yeah.
Mom. We were on Grinder.
Yeah.
Let's just get this over with.
Well, it's kind of good because his dad kind of piped up and was like, well, that's how I know so and so. We met online and now we're really good friends. And they, so that's something she,
There is a weird stigma just to that phrase.
Isn't that weird?
Met online.
Yeah.
Because for so many years, online meetups was just nothing but sketch. Now it's a completely different. Yeah. It's totally changed. Yeah, that's really fun. Did you ever hear of a site called Turntable FM? I know you're into music.
I know what it is. I've heard of it, yeah, but I've never used it or anything like that.
That was an interesting community where they had, for those who don't know what it is was basically a website where they created virtual rooms and you had little virtual avatars. And you could basically share music. So you enter this virtual room and there was one person on the quote-unquote the decks at a time. And I could get up on the deck and I could share songs that I was into. Or for me, if I was playing my own songs in front of like a virtual crowd and they could chat and talk to each other. Then you take turns. I get off the decks and then your little avatar would get up and get on the decks and share songs. And you could vote on songs and like give plus. And it created this community where some of my best online friends are all from this site. They inevitably ran into some serious legal trouble because you're just like streaming music that you like and they weren't like paying and they tried to. It was before Spotify was like really big, and but it reminds me a little bit of what you're trying to accomplish with the cockpit thing, meaning like if you could do that cockpit thing where someone could be flight training and you could have 4 or 5 of your most knowledgeable buddies there virtually with them. You're not just getting one-on-one training with someone. You have the community all in there, talking to each other, hanging out, walking you through things. That's sort of like what Turntable FM was. You could have a room of 100 of your online friends that are all into music. I get up and I could share my new tracks. And then those people would blog about it, and like vice versa. And I'm still friends with a lot of those guys. And like you said, a lot of them, when I would tour, I would always end up sleeping. Sometimes it wouldn't even be with them. Like, it'd be like, hey, I know a guy in the city. I don't even live in that city, but I got a homie in that city, and I will link you up and vouch for you. And then I would end up like hanging out with complete strangers that knew someone that I knew online and have a great time. And it wasn't sketchy.
Is huge. Well, that's what gets weird. And I always think like, because my wife doesn't do gaming or anything like that, but like I would honestly like if she was like, yeah, I'm gonna go hang out. We're gonna go to this place with someone I met online. I'd be like, oh, and she's kind of starting out with her Instagram stuff, and she's doing her own like Etsy shop, and she's trying to network with a lot of other shop owners and all that kind of stuff, so that she can, try to grow her business and stuff like that. So I'm kind of she's kind of getting into that now, but like she's met my friends. Like we went to Sun and Fun Air Show in Florida and met a bunch of my friends that I only knew from online. We have a big picture with all of us, and we only know each other from online. And we all share a passion for aviation. Some of us for flight simulators, but aviation in general. So it's just really cool to think that that's what brought us together. Like it's made it so much easier to find like-minded people with the internet. Whereas at the beginning it was just AOL. It's like, okay, my friend from school, I'm going to go chat with my friend on AOL on AIM Instant Messenger. That's how I learned how to type on the computer. It was from AIM. I don't know if you use that, but talking, and that's how I booked a whole tour with my band when we were 18, 19. And I booked a whole West Coast tour through AIM Instant Messenger. So all people that I had just met online through mp3.com. I know, kind of all over the place.
Yeah.
mp3.com was big, man. So this was so weird. We never got big or anything like that, but we had a catchy song or two. And like, I remember when we came through Utah, we played at some random place, man. Like, gosh, I'm trying to remember. I want to say it was like in Layton. Yeah. We played a couple shows in Utah. One of them was in Layton at some punk, where punk bands would play. And I remember we started playing our song. We had 40, 50 people there, which was good for us, at the time. And these kids were singing our song. And I'm like, what the heck? We're from California. We're from Southern California. How did these kids know our song? I'm like, mp3.com. That was like the precursor to everything,
What happened to mp3.com? What is it?
I don't know, man, but it was huge at the time. I mean, that was like everything for us. That was totally how we disseminated our music. I mean, yeah, and I don't think you would put like a whole album up there. You just put like a couple songs up. But those are the songs that those people would sing along to. And you're like, I was just stoked, man. I'm like, dude, this is a song I wrote. Like, people are singing along to it. This is crazy. So in a different state. So.
Yeah, it looks like it's still something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But that's how you would actually kind of, when you were trying to book a show at some venue, we booked a show. I booked a show in Seattle via a friend, and they would refer them to your mp3.com site. Whereas before, just right prior to mp3.com coming out, you'd have to send them a CD or send them some
yeah.
It was really hard. It was a lot of work to get something like that going. But it wasn't an efficient tour by any means. But we were kind of zigzagging across the West Coast, and I'm in furthest east we got was probably like Pocatello, Idaho, or something. But yeah, I mean it was super cool. So that's how we got it done.
If you had one ultimate, most nostalgic gaming memory from any time, like the most magical moment, whether it's Flight Simulator, like a specific time, or like a certain time playing with your kid on a game, what's the best memory?
Ooh, man. I wasn't expecting this question. Dang, dude.
It's my finale, baby. I always ask. Not always, but shoot, man. Sometimes.
Like there's like different memories for every phase of gaming that I can think of. Do you know what I mean?
Let's run through it.
Well, I mean, there's just those special moments with my dad playing Flight Simulator as a kid, right? I mean, there's those where he teaches me something and whatever. Actually, one I do remember was sitting there with him playing NES, and he just sat down with me, and he played Skate or Die, and I was just like, man, this is so freaking cool that my dad's playing Skate or Die.
Yeah.
And he told me he's like, yeah, I used to skateboard. He's like, I used to skate a lot when I was younger, and then this is in the 70s. I'm like, you used to skate? And he's like, yeah, I used to skate.
You were cool, Dad?
Yeah. Well, and I was only I must have been 7,
Yeah.
But I was I was into skating at that time, with some old school 80s board. But that was just a moment I really remember as a little kid. I remember that, he spent that time with me, and it wasn't much, he probably spent maybe 15, 20 minutes with me playing that game. But, that really stands out. In my mind, so that's one. I mean, in different eras, like all the summers growing up playing with kids down the street, like one of my good friends, Brad Newbold, we grew up down the street from them, and he would come over every day, and he was 5 years older than me, but he would come over.
That's a lot of time when you're little.
Yeah, he was a lot older than me, but we were really good friends, and I actually texted him tonight before I did this podcast. I'm like, hey, I'm doing this podcast. Like, well, is this the game that we used to play, this little league game? Yeah, and he's like, dude, just send me that when you're done. He's stoked on it. So, we connected over video games throughout the years. With my sister would play, his sister would play, my brothers would play. Yeah, I'm trying to think. What else? Probably one of the most special things was being able to spend all that time with my dad before he passed away, obviously. Yeah. As far as one specific moment,
that whole concept, that whole story, you should send that to Battlefield, the devs.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
That's a really cool story.
I just had lunch with my uncle up in Utah 2 days ago as we were on our way down from vacation, and we were just talking about that. He's like, "Man, we need to get playing games again." He's like, "It's not the same without your dad, but he's like, it's just such a fond memory that he has, and like they're Irish twins, so they're only 11 months apart, um, and but he bought a Vive headset, virtual reality headset, and then his son, my cousin, just bought a headset, and then I bought a headset. So we're all we want to get in there and go play the same games together.
Can you have
The virtual
cross-platform
reality.
with Oculus and Vive?
Yeah. So like all the Steam games are pretty much compatible. Well, you have to look at the game to make sure it's compatible with the certain type of headset that you have. I have the Rift S. He has a Vive, and then my cousin has a Valve Index. So we all have three, and then the only one that's not compatible with all this, I think, is the Oculus Go, which
Okay.
my other cousin-in-law has, and that one's kind of like its own. It has games like as
It's
a
like all on its
standalone
own,
headset.
self-contained.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and they were explaining it to me because I didn't fully understand how it worked, but yeah, it's all kind of standalone. But I think you can access Steam games if you kind of know the workaround for it. But anyways, we all want to get in there and do some VR together. I was explaining them the flight sim stuff, but yeah, I mean, it's a lot of that stuff though. It's just like moments in life, like where a lot of like the really good moments were just spontaneous moments. When you try to like go back and recreate them, it doesn't
You
really
can't.
work.
You can't do it. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's those moments kind of just happen. But yeah, so I mean, every era of like these games that I've explained to you that have been a kind of a big part of my life without being too cheesy, but they've had an impact on my life, and it's special to me. My wife might kind of laugh at that, but it really is, and I don't know why. It's kind of interesting how that plays, and maybe it's just our generation that it's special to us because it's at at the point in time that we were growing up.
We
I
are
don't know.
the
Maybe
this nostalgia generation. I mean, there's a
yeah,
market for nostalgia, hence why we're doing this podcast and Stranger
sure, yeah,
Things and all that stuff.
absolutely,
I think it's always been around. I'm sure nostalgia has always been a real thing, but there just wasn't this platform with the internet and the media to be able to provide as much. If you were living in the 50s and you wanted to enjoy some nostalgia about growing up in the 30s, you just have to hang out with your buddies that you knew growing up, and
yeah,
that was it. You couldn't. No one could really disseminate any sort of media or experience to you to bring that back up. You couldn't have I love YouTube. I watch a lot of gaming retrospectives where people will do like little documentaries on old games and kind of put their own angle, and they will each one of them will pull up like different random things, and you have some guys that are really good. There's nothing like that. Um, there wasn't anything like that. So I don't know if we feel more nostalgic now, like gaming is special, or we just actually have the ability to serve the need, or the we can actually supply the demand now, whereas you
yeah,
couldn't
exactly.
before.
We have the resources to be able to do that and to be
Yeah.
able to disseminate it at a much greater scale, to so many more people than we could have before. In order to do that before, you had to do it through, the relatively rudimentary mediums that were available at the time, right? Via, i.e., music, CDs and vinyl and all that kind of stuff. Whereas now, like, man, the digital world, has globalized this so quickly. I mean, there's people I play flight sim with that live in Europe and all over the world, man. And they're so cool. Like one guy that I fly with in Germany on a regular basis. He's like, "Yeah, man, when you're in Germany, you can come stay at my place."
Come
Like,
hang out, yeah.
I'm like, "Okay, yeah, cool," and totally comfortable. Like, not weird at all. Like, it's things like that. So, um, but
You,
he's got I don't know. It's just weird this generation that we're in. It's cool. It's exciting. It's
you,
exciting to live in this
you've
generation.
definitely
So
been the most, I would say, yeah, unique. You're number 12. I don't know if it's going to be uploaded as chronologically as number 12.
yeah,
But like I said earlier, Mario's really the only overlap you've had with anybody else.
weird, huh? Isn't it?
But you're
And I
like,
think that's.
I would actually say you're a hardcore gamer.
I
You're
would say
just
that too.
hardcore
Yeah,
into like a completely sim
different genre.
type world. Whether it's FPS. I mean, obviously you're deep down the rabbit hole in flight sim, but you're also a
Yeah,
pilot, which makes sense. But the fact that like you're playing Arma with dudes who are actually ex-military that are teaching you what to, like, you you're a hardcore gamer, just not in what is the most common way. You're not a nerd. You're not into like
Yep.
nerd culture.
No.
When people say
Like,
gamer, that they wouldn't conjure up you in their mind.
no. They're like, someone was trying to get me to play D&D the other night. I'm like, nah, man. I just know that's not my thing. Like, someone was, my friends are like really into like Elder Scrolls. Oh, what's that one game?
Oh, Skyrim. That's a big popular
Skyrim.
one.
I
Yeah.
have it on here, thinking, and I bought it with full intention of like, hey, I'm gonna play this game, and this looks cool. It just doesn't do it for me. I don't know what it is. It's just not my thing. Even other like war-based games, that are more turn-based type things, like where like the top-down, where you're controlling troops and all that kind of stuff. Not really my thing, dude. I don't know what it is, but and that's kind of when you posted that you were doing this. I'm like, I've kind of known for a little while that I'm slightly different than most
Gamers.
typical
Yeah.
gamers.
Yeah.
Even the guys I meet in sim stuff, like they dig a lot of those games like World of Warcraft and all that stuff, and they came from that genre and then moved into flight sim. But I've never really dabbled or touched that stuff. So
I mean, you literally started with flight sim, which is so crazy.
that was the first thing I probably touched. Yeah.
It's
probably the first game I ever played. Yeah.
There's a definitely. Have you heard of the game Dark Souls?
I've heard of it. Yeah.
It's a series. It's really well. The series is known for being incredibly difficult and having a high learning curve. And a lot of us that are into Dark Souls and that we will do like achievements and platinum, and like you get a little sense of, oh, I'm a gamer, but I'm into hard games and I'm into the challenge, which is true. That game is challenging, but I already know for 1,000,000% fact, based on me dabbling with anything simulated, like the Europa game we were talking about. I have played with Flight Simulator a couple times. Couldn't even like turn the airplane on. Like the barrier to entry on the things that you are into is so much higher than quote unquote the hardest gamer games that people get into. That's what I mean. Like, I think you're a different level of you're like even more hardcore than what people consider a hardcore gamer, because the commitment I imagine it takes to get good at Flight Sim or Arma or Squad or Tarkov, all these games you were talking. I've dabbled in all these games, and one thing becomes apparent immediately. Like, oh, this is. Like, I have to be committed to this, like I'm committed to jujitsu or music, and I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm not ready to add on a hobby like that. I don't have. I can't. There's no middle ground. You can't casually play Flight Sim.
Well, and I mean you can, but at the same time, like this is what I tell these other guys who I interact with who do flight sim who aren't real world pilots. I say I could never have gone down this path the way that you did, because I wouldn't have been willing to put in all the time to learn about aviation, to learn all these, concepts about aviation, unless I did it in real life, if that makes sense. So
yeah.
And so I gave it to a lot of these guys and who are super dedicated, and the programmers, like interacting with programmers is such a different thing too. Cause I meet a lot of these guys and I really appreciate their level of, learning and how they have to, to me, like I know this stuff because I went to school for it and I do it in real life. And so, yeah, of course I can bring it to the computer, right? I can bring it to the stuff, but then these guys, they bring just a whole different level of dedication to
That's
the hobby,
true.
right?
Like if you were
You know what I
to
mean?
build
So they're
Flight
even
Simulator,
beyond me. Like, yeah, they're way beyond what like my dedication to it, if that makes sense. So
do they just consult with pilots when they build these type of simulators?
absolutely, yeah, and
that's
they
the only way
value
to
that
do
a
it.
lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, they value their time with pilots. I beta tested one of the bigger Airbus models for X-Plane 11. So they brought me on it. I knew one of the bigger streamers in the flight sim world on Twitch, and he knows that I'm a real world pilot. He actually lives in Utah. He actually brought me in on the beta testing for this Airbus. He's like, we have to bring you in on it. We need your input and everything, and see how things feel. And so that's kind of what I'm focusing on right now with like my streaming. I'm like, okay, I think I'll bring in. I'm just been flying different Airbus models and trying to see what they feel like and how realistic they feel. And kind of see what we can do with that. But yeah, so I think like going back to what you were saying about we're into different things, even though we can totally just jam on this for 2 hours, right?
Yeah.
It's just a different paradigm. We're in two different kind of paradigms with what we, how we consume our media, if that makes sense, of video games. It's like,
Yeah. mean, it's exactly what
Yeah.
I wanted. I wanted to bring people on and explore, okay, what things are similar and how different are. And I have been surprised that you've obviously been the most different. You mentioned Mario, but no one has actually been as similar as I would have expected coming
Okay.
into it. Like,
Yeah,
obviously,
yeah.
there's a lot of Mario, there's a lot of Zelda, there's a lot of Halo brought
I
up.
played Zelda. Yeah, I forgot
Yeah.
to mention that too. Yeah, I
There's a
played
few
Zelda.
big ones that are really cultural phenomenons that most people bring up, but in between that, everyone's pretty different, even though we all grew up gaming.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So it's interesting. I mean, and when we start going down that path of talking about all these games, I realize how many games I've played growing up and how many games are even out there. And it's weird how, like, the market has actually like catered to all different types of people and what they like and don't like. And I don't know. It's interesting, man. I just didn't even realize it until we started talking about it. But
Well, where can people find you on Twitch? On Rushforth?
Sendero, so twitch.tv/Sendero, Sendaero is kind of the handle I've been using lately on Twitch. Got a YouTube under that same handle. Got a bunch of flight sim videos and things like that. Kind of a variety going on right now, but yeah, mainly I've been kind of trying to. My goal has been to stream a couple times a week, as of the past few weeks. So I think I'll be working on that. Got some stuff in the pipeline with another couple pilots, another couple of airline pilots I've been working with. We're just trying to figure out kind of what we want to do here. But yeah, mainly
Well, if you're
Twitch.
interested in flight sim or airline stuff or flying, this is your dude. I'm sure you can find him online. I'll get links and everything from you for everything. Put it in the description. Put it in the intro.
Awesome.
And the outro. Thanks so much for your time. We are actually, I think we're at like 2.5, almost 3 hours.
Oh my goodness! Wow.
Every single time I do one of these, for the most part, it goes way, way longer than you don't even realize. The time just goes crazy. So
Yeah,
it's a
man.
good thing.
Yeah.
If it was
Definitely,
dragging,
yeah.
then it means it was a shitty podcast.
Well, totally enjoyable for me, and yeah, man, it's good to reconnect with you. And
We'll
super
have
cool.
you back on. I want to have you come back on. So what I'm thinking for repeat guests is, like, obviously you go through people's memories, but then we can talk about recent memories, recent games. And then also
Yeah.
with you, I'd love to follow up on any kind of this business idea you had, shared cockpit experiences,
Yep.
how much better the sim world is getting and the VR world is getting, because you're much deeper. I haven't gotten into VR at all. You think I'd be one of the first adopters, but I just haven't done it. So you'd be a great
Yeah.
person to bring on and kind of talk about that.
Yeah, I'd love to do that, man. I'm thinking about this stuff all day long. So yeah, definitely.
Sweet, man. Appreciate your time. Adios, friends. And that is a wrap. If you're listening to this, as I always say, that means you listen to Ooh, I messed that one up. That means you listened to the entirety of the podcast. I'm going to leave that one, and you know what? I'm not going to edit that out because this is the end of the podcast, and I bet 2 of you assholes are actually going to hear this. So to whoever the lucky 2 assholes are that are listening to this, I love you. And the rest of you clearly are not doing your duty as members of the One True Gaming Podcast. Go out there and share the goddamn good news of the Gaming Memories gospel. You can't do that if you didn't listen to the whole motherfucking episode. Right? Right. Anyway, next week on the podcast, let me look it up who it is, because I don't have it off the top of my head. It is Steve Mother Whoopsies Phillips, also known as Durandal. He is a bass music producer who makes the deep, dark, wobbly dub step. For your UK garage, deep, dark, chill dubstep needs, Durandal, a.k.a. Steve Phillips, has your prescription covered. He'll be on next week. We filmed it on location at his house because he also has a giant-ass collection of video games, which we talk about in tandem with his favorite gaming memories growing up. Until then, do your duty, say your prayers, do the cross little thing that the Catholics do. We're stealing that from them. I'm going to lift that shit from their religion. Look, everything's a remix, including God's One True Gaming Podcast. Love y'all. See you later. Peace.